Evening, everyone. Welcome to our meeting this evening. We're starting a little bit early so that we can have an orientation session. Tonight it's on wastewater management. So I'll officially call the meeting to order and then turn it over to Sam so you can orient us.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. Yes, this evening we've prepared a PowerPoint presentation just for a few reasons, partially to provide just kind of an overview to incoming councillors and also as a refresher to our existing or returning councillors, sorry. So this evening, I guess to start here, just want to outline some of the things that we're responsible for here at the Township of Malahide. So we look for, when in terms of water, we have the Malahide. Sorry, my apologies. I just gotta turn this right on. Okay. That better? Okay, sorry about that. So yes, as far as the water systems go, Malahide has the Malahide Water Distribution System, which is exclusively owned by the Township of Malahide. So the water system is more of a branch system or tertiary systems that draw water off of what is considered the Elmer Area Secondary Water Supply System, which is the pipeline from St. Thomas to Elmer. That supplies water to the Malahide Distribution System along Rogers Road, residents along Talbot Line, in Norton Street, Orwell. Then the water enters the town of Elmer. And I've got a map to help with this a bit. So it's on the next slide. But so the water passing through the Elmer Secondary from St. Thomas to Elmer provides to those tertiary parts of Malahide and then sends water to the town of Elmer. From there, parts of our municipality receive water from the town of Elmer, for example, to the road or Dingle Street. They're receiving water from the Elmer distribution system, and then essentially that comes our system as it exits the town of Elmer. So on the map that I'm about to show, you'll see some branches that represent our water system. But then in addition to that, the Elmer Area Secondary Water Supply System Joint Board of Management is a joint board that represents the municipality Central Elgin, town of Elmer, and Malahide. Wow. So we make up the members of that board, and the municipalities essentially vote. Sorry, I'm okay. Yeah, the municipalities essentially meet through a joint board of management to oversee the operations of that pipeline, vote on capital projects, and look at the overall operation of the pipeline, similarly to how we run our own system. In addition to that, the township municipality on behalf of the Port Burwell Area Secondary Water Supply System. So that is water basically from the Elgin plant near Port Stanley there on Dexter Line. It provides water that heads towards, basically heading east. There's a valve house that supplies and fills the water tower on Nova Scotia Line, the Port Burwell Water Tower. And so that section of pipeline is really supplying all of our residents in the south end of the municipality. And both pipelines are separate, the Elmer supply, the Burwell supply. And so as you'll see on my next map, I'll elaborate some more on that. In addition to that, we operate a wastewater collection system with the township. So we have approximately 80 access holes or manholes and just over 6 kilometers of gravity sewers within Springfield, along with a sewage pumping station that pumps waste to the OPC. And then we have an additional pumping station that we own and operate at the OPC, which pumps all the waste from Springfield and the OPC to the Elmer Lagoons for treatment. So those are some of the systems that we oversee the administration for. So I've got a map here to give some context. And so as you'll see, the kind of where my cursor is here, the purple line represents the regional water supply or the Elgin area primary water supply. So it has its own board, and that pipeline is essentially supplying water to several local municipalities, and it pumps water from the lake to the Elgin Middlesex pumping station that you see noted above. So from there, that building houses the pumps for St. Thomas, Elmer, London. And there's a separate hub of Aqua that we work with through a separate contract that's shared between those St. Thomas, Elmer, London, where all the pumping operations and the cost of operating the facility is divided through flow proportion to the members. In addition to that, so now you'll see here the red line essentially. So that is the Elmer area secondary water supply system. It's approximately 14 kilometers long with several chambers and various components that make it up. Additionally to the Elmer secondary system, the EMPS is considered a component of the system because this is where the pumps that exist that pump the water to the town of Elmer. So as you'll see, they're all interconnected. So we work in partnership with Aqua to oversee these systems. And Aqua kind of looks at the day-to-day operational, maintaining water quality, sampling, monitoring, meeting regulatory requirements, and ensuring we achieve compliance. The staff are tasked with dealing with residents, planning, capital repairs and infrastructure repairs. As the owners, we are the responsible party to oversee the repairs. So the operating authority can identify a deficiency or where there's a need for repair, but we are the ones that decide if we're the ones who control the funds to make these repairs. So as you'll see within the map here as well, so you'll see the little green lines that represent our water system, which as you'll note is kind of branched in several locations. So kind of here you see the end of the red line where my mouse is. Now water's entering Elmer. As it exits Elmer, we have a section on Talbot East and then residents on Dingle and Hacienda that receive water from this location. In the south end, so we've got the Port Burwell secondary water supply system. So this pipeline is basically approximately 34 kilometers long, and Malahide is, as the administering municipality, we work in partnership with Central Elgin and Bayham Township to oversee the administration for this pipeline. And essentially we meet with a joint board of management to make decisions for that pipeline and vote on capital projects. And we would perform rate studies similar to what we would do for our own system for these systems as well. So this pipeline is substantially longer than the Elmer supply. And as you can see, there's a section here where it was realigned for shoreline erosion. But ultimately, we're working in partnership with Aqua on these systems as well. And so because this system supplies water to our system, it's the same staff through separate contracts that we work with to manage all of this together. And so that's just kind of a brief summary of how this ties together. And so I'll move forward here to some additional information on our water system. So the Malahide water distribution system, it consists of approximately 22 kilometers of water mains. We have one booster pumping station in Copenhagen, which is shown in the photos on the slide. So this pumping station draws water off that Burwell secondary line, but the system pressure coming from that line is not adequate to push the water to our residents on Imperial Road, Rush Creek Line, Colton, Vienna Line, Jamestown Line, that kind of area of the municipality. So this station runs 24/7 to boost the pressure to give a more adequate operational pressure to these residents. And so in addition to that, we have approximately 640 customer connections. Within our system, we have 12 sampling testing stations where we monitor weekly for various water quality parameters. We have 47 hydrants within the Malahide system, and this Copenhagen booster station is operated and maintained, or at least it is connected to what's called a supervisory control and data acquisition system, or SCADA, which is an operational tool that we use for monitoring, recording of data, trending, alarm notification, and the ability to remotely make changes to these sites through various set points that control them. So moving forward here, the Elmer Area Secondary Water Supply System, which I mentioned before, approximately a 14-kilometer water main, 18-inch diameter water main with 19 inline chambers for drainage, draining, isolation, metering, pressure relief, and pressure monitoring. There are 16 hydrants connected to the Elmer secondary system. So this is along Talbot line between St. Thomas and Elmer. 5 sample testing stations along that line. And then there are additionally 5 tertiary metering chambers where water is going to parts of Central Elgin or parts of Malahide. And the Elmer Area Secondary System is also a component or connected to the SCADA system as well. And so I'll just move on to the Burwell Secondary here. This pipeline, approximately 34 kilometers long. There's a 12-inch transite or AC pipe, and there's some sections that have been replaced with PVC. And this particular water system I'm referring to, similar to the Elmer, is something we would typically report to the board, not to council, but it's more for your information. So this pipeline, yes, as I noted, has 2 rechlorination facilities where we boost the chlorine along the way to ensure the water is continually protected as it travels through the pipeline. There is 1 elevated water storage tower with additional rechlorination. There are 50 chambers with drain, isolation, metering, air release, and pressure relief. 11 hydrants, 5 sample stations, and this is also connected to the supervisory control and data acquisition system. So I've got a little screenshot from our SCADA system here just to give you a bit of an idea. And this is a very condensed overview. You're talking, if you look in the bottom left corner, that represents the Elgin treatment plant. And is it okay if I come over here? Right. So this represents the Elgin treatment plant. This would represent all the water coming along Nova Scotia and Dexter line. And so this would be the water tower in Port Burwell. Essentially, this communicates with this valve to open or to fill that tower on level control. You're looking at about 27 kilometers distance between these 2 sites that remotely connect and talk to each other to control that operation. Here, you've got the Elgin plant along Lake Erie. This would represent the EMPS here. So this is essentially in St. Thomas. And what you see here is flow monitoring in Orwell, and then at the entry point to Elmer, and then the Elmer water tower. So this is about a 14-kilometer section of pipe here you're looking at. And then you can see it's kind of confusing the schematic, but this kind of represents the water coming off of the other secondary system and going to our Copenhagen booster system, which pumps to the Malahide distribution. So that's a condensed screen. You can individually view all of these sites, but just wanted to provide that for your reference. And there are several advantages to having that SCADA system. One of the other parts that I would mention is that we operate what's called the APAM SCADA. So it represents both the Elmer board, the Port Burwell board, and Malahide. So when we talk about SCADA or upgrades to SCADA or anything like that, it requires mutual approval from both boards and our council. And it actually draws from our sewer budget, our water budget, and then the 2 secondaries pay for their sites. So it's all based on a breakdown based on the number of sites connected to the system, and they all pay for their kind of benefit to access the central server that runs the SCADA system. And in addition to that, there is essentially a wide area network that operates the SCADA system because it is a standalone system. It is not connected to the internet. So as for obvious reasons, we have to operate an independent system that is not easily accessible. So, and I guess just to add to this, as I mentioned before, we work in partnership with Aqua. So every water system in Ontario requires a designated operating authority to administer, to maintain that system, operate the system. And so within the operating authority is required to have an overall responsible operator for all water systems. So Aqua acts as our overall responsible operator, and so the ORO basically has to be available for questions dealing with issues 24/7, 365. But so that kind of summarizes the role of Aqua, and I guess I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that. It's one of those things that, you know, out of sight, out of mind, you think it's just happens by magic, right?
Right. And I guess I would add, sorry, you know, the other part of this that's really important, Jeff just reminded me, is fire, because fire protection, this water system, these three water systems, and as you start to look at that map and how they tie into each other, you know, it's important to note that the water system acts as a fire protection system for our municipality. Obviously, we do have additional areas where we can draft from ponds to provide coverage to the whole municipality, but it's just important to note that there's a dual benefit to these water systems. Sorry.
Thank you for that. Deputy Mayor Widner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through to Sam. I see asbestos cement, and that always is a flag, but does the water actually run through the asbestos or?
Through your worship to Deputy Mayor Widner, it's not a concern. Asbestos is considered to be inert in terms of as a pipe. The only time there's any concern with asbestos is where you're cutting it and it becomes airborne and it's inhaled or through your respiratory tract. So as far as there is actually, it's a scary word, but it's not really, it's got a bad reputation, but it's considered inert and not harmful or adverse.
One second, one if I could. Just another question. I know years ago, the water that runs through Elmer was a lot more muddy than the water that runs through their line. Is that still the case?
Through your worship. So yes, I would suggest there is substantially more water sold through the Elmer pipeline than through the Port Burwell secondary system. And so it's fair to say that there's a lot to how the board operates. The customers of the boards are the three municipalities. So that's why there'll be a counselor from each municipality representing the municipality, but acting in the best interest of the board. So the boards have to set their rates accordingly to fund capital, fund future replacements. There is a higher board rate for the Port Burwell secondary, the cost we're having to charge ourselves for the water we're purchasing as opposed to the Elmer secondary. So that is correct, that because the one pipeline sells slightly more, but all of this is balanced through rates in an equitable way to our residents. And these systems are really have an interconnected or a greater, wider benefit to the whole municipality. So there is some truth to the fact that we do sell more water in the north than in the south. And so it's easier for that board to operate and build reserves at lower rates, essentially, or charging itself a lower rate. Because that's the thing I want to get across, is that the customers of the boards are the municipalities. So it's kind of confusing. Each municipality is tasked with selling water to their residents as the water comes off of these pipelines. So we do basically an annual water loss balance where we determine the flow proportions for each municipality, and that's what sets the rates for the boards, and each member municipality pays a shared rate based on their flow proportion from the previous year. So hopefully that clarifies.
Any other questions? Councillor Leach.
I have a question for Stan. I noticed in the capital budget forecast that the 2022 budget showed a lot of infrastructure upgrades to the Copenhagen plant?
Yes.
pumping Station?
so,
Have they been implemented? Are they planned? What is the status?
through you, your worship, I would suggest that that station, being that it works 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, has regular maintenance needs that are somewhat unforeseeable. In my time here, we have done regular maintenance at regular intervals, but there are some challenges in operating that station where we know, because of the sizing of the pumps and the type of impellers that we're using, that essentially they require almost annual or semi-annual kind of impeller replacements. That's just kind of standard operating. So there's been continuous investment in the station, but there's always more that can be done, I would suggest. So we continue to operate it. We also plan ahead and foresee that we will have anticipated maintenance next year and probably the year after. And it's just kind of the way the station operates at such a, like I say, it never shuts off. So it's working pretty hard.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Councillor Wilson.
Through you, Mayor. I know that when I tried to come through the door here earlier on this fall and got stopped, but that's all right. There was some talk about pipeline to Springfield. And I guess what are plans regarding anything with that? And right now we happen to be drilling a bunch of test wells in the Dorchester well field, and there's hundreds of gallons a minute right out of the ground for free. So any thought being given to that?
I may defer to my director on that one, but I will just open, sorry, through you, your worship. I would just suggest, so in the last council's term, there was a feasibility study that was conducted to determine or to look at, whether it would or would not be feasible to bring water to Springfield, and kind of look at potential costs and what advantages there might be. But I guess I'm going to stop there even and maybe defer to Matt just to give his answer there as well.
Thank you, through your worship. Thank you, Sam. So on the comment of water to Springfield, as Sam mentioned, yes, there was a feasibility study that was presented to council. As of now, council hasn't made a decision on servicing Springfield. There's still some questions to be answered. And it's expected that there will be a staff analysis of that feasibility report brought back to council's attention for consideration. And it's also expected too that there would be public consultation in that process as well. So there was an exploration, and that's where it's at this moment.
Any other questions? Deputy Mayor Widner.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The word water loss came up, and I know years ago, we had an awful time on, I guess, on the Port Rule. Like, we were losing truckloads of this stuff. Is that still a problem?
Through you, your worship, that has been significantly improved. I believe, and I'm speaking through past staff that I've had consultation with. Prior to my time here, as far as I know, yes, the water losses were much higher. I guess probably around 2005 would be my guess. A lot had been done prior to probably between 2005 to 2017 to rectify some of those issues. And that is really more speaking to the Port Burwell secondary system, because it is approximately 50 years old, that pipeline. So there were more water losses, in the early 2000s, but in the last 5 years that I've been here, the water loss has been below 10% every year. And that's really the universal goal that any municipality or anyone operating a municipally run water system, the standard is 10% that you You're always going to have to flush to maintain water quality. You're going to have unknown water losses, leaks, and fires. And so though that water that's consumed or considered almost non-revenue or unaccounted for water gets added to the water losses essentially. But overall, there's been significant increases with metering, flow monitoring, the SCADA system, which was implemented in 2007. Just by having that system, for example, if you see increased flows at one of these sites, it gives us an indication of a leak. So we have a lot more controls in place. But that being said, they can happen anytime, and sometimes they can be difficult to find.
And I think this was, somebody was borrowing a lot of water, because I think your system showed overnight, wow.
And there's definitely, through your worship, we have hydrant locks and different various controls in place. So to prevent just anybody from walking up to a fire hydrant and operating it. But there's definitely in the past that's kind of been an issue in many municipalities, I believe. So.
So to wrap up, Sam, is there a main takeaway that you really hope council will, keep in mind, understand, not forget?
Through your worship, I think one of the main takeaways is to understand how our role to these water systems and the fact that our staff are tasked with, working for our municipality and also in addition, for these other municipalities through the role that I work at the township. And so really, I think it's just a nice opportunity to bring that to the surface, and kind of not everyone gets to see what each board member does for their various boards. So this is kind of an opportunity to give council that overview and understand kind of the greater aspects of this system. That's my number one takeaway, I think, that I wanted to get across tonight, if anything. So
Great. Well, I think you did a great job of that.
Yeah,
And find you.
not everyone can see what each board member does for their various boards. So this is kind of an opportunity to give council that overview and
Instant
understand
replay.
kind of the greater aspects of this.
Okay, let's reconvene. And next on the agenda is disclosure of pecuniary interest. Deputy Mayor Widner.
Yes, thank you. Mayor Daguerre, I have two under E, Kettle Creek Drain and the Pressy Line Drain.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so noted. Next is approval of previous minutes. You want to read the resolution?
That the minutes of the regular meeting of council held on December 1st, 2022 be adopted as printed and circulated.
Can I have a mover and seconder? Serna, Lewis, any questions or comments, errors, omissions on the minutes? Seeing none, can I have the vote? All in favor? Carried. Next, this evening, we have a number of presentations and delegations. We'll start with the public hearing.
So that the Committee of Adjustment for the Township of Malahide be called to order at 7:33 PM and that Mayor Dominique Giguère be appointed chairperson for the Committee of Adjustment.
Have mover and seconder. Serna, Widner, all in favor? Carried. So I can advise that the purpose of this hearing is to consider an application for a minor variance as submitted by Ian Johnson as the applicant and Mike Wall as the agent The property location is known municipally as 1331 Hale Street. Can I turn it over to Eric for an overview of the application, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. Subject property contains an existing dwelling, a detached garage, and accessory structure, and the owners are proposing to demolish the existing dwelling and rebuild with a similar footprint. And as part of that reconstruction, they are proposing to add a covered porch to the front of the dwelling. Currently, the existing dwelling does meet the minimum front yard setback requirements. However, with the addition of the porch, it wouldn't meet that requirement. And due to the location of the septic system on the property, the dwelling cannot be located further away to the north, away from the street. And so the applicant's proposing a front yard setback of 4.3 meters, where the zoning bylaw requires a front yard setback of 6 meters. Minor variance applications are evaluated against 4 tests under the Planning Act. The residential uses are permitted under both the county and Malahide official plans. A portion of the property is designated as flood fringe. And under this designation, the extension or enlargement of existing structures is permitted, provided that the regulations of the zoning bylaw and conservation authority are in compliance. Comments have been received from Catfish Creek Conservation Authority, confirming that a permit would be required for any work on the property, and any buildings or structures would need to meet minimum floodproofing elevation requirements. So the application is considered to be in conformity with the intent of the official plans. The intent of the front yard setback is to establish a uniform streetscape, as well as provide adequate building separation from the road. And it's noted that there are several other dwellings along Hale Street that do have reduced front yard setbacks. And it's not anticipated that the proposed covered porch would anyway impact the function of Hale Street. Additionally, the proposed front yard setback would be, again noted, similar to other properties in the area. And so it's not considered to have a significant impact on adjacent properties or the landowners for using their properties for their permitted uses. And so the application is considered minor in nature. And finally, the proposed variance would permit a covered porch to be added to the front of the dwelling that would allow the existing or the dwelling to be reconstructed and also recognize the constraints on the property due to the location of the subject system, limiting the ability of the dwelling to be in compliance with the zoning bylaw. And so their application is considered to be meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and staff recommending that the minor variance application be approved subject to conditions provided. And I note that at the time of the submission of the report, there are no comments received from members of the public. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take questions from members of council.
Thank you, Eric. Maybe first I'll go to maybe Mr. Johnson or Mr. Wald. Do you have anything to add to the committee? Yes. If there's anything you need to add to the presentation that you want the committee to?
I don't think so.
No?
I don't think so. Just it's an old house, eh? It's 1850. But I want a single story home with 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms on 1 floor. And the old house has a rotten foundation, absolutely. In parts, it's just hanging in the air. So I would rather not have the old house. The reason I can't move it farther north is I'm getting into flood fringe, floodway. The property drops down at the back. So that's the purpose of the minor variance application. Thank you.
Thank you for that additional context. Allison, were there any comments received?
Through your worship, there were no additional comments received.
Any members of the committee have any questions or comments? Seeing none. Thank you for everyone's input. Do you want to read the resolution?
That report number DS 2258 entitled Minor Variance Application number D13 MV 1022 of Ian Johnson be received, and that the application for minor variance application number D13 MV 1022 of Ian Johnson relating to property located in Plan 55, Part Lots 5 and 6, Reference Plan 11R 2886, Part 1 in the Township of Malahide, known as 3136 Hale Street, be approved for the reasons set out herein, and that the approval shall be subject to the following 2 conditions.
Do you include the condition as
That's
cited
fine,
in
as cited,
the
yeah.
report? Perfect. Can I have a mover and seconder? Lewis, Wilson, all in favor? Carried.
That the Committee of Adjustment for the Township of Malahide be adjourned and that the council meeting reconvene at 7:38.
Mover and seconder, Glinski, Serna, all in favor? Carried. Okay, so next we have a meeting to consider a Kettle Creek drain. I'm not sure which one. And this evening, do we have Mike or George?
It's Mike. Hello.
Looks like Mike. Yes, welcome.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Okay. The Kettle Creek Drain Report was prepared in accordance with Section 78 of the Drainage Act, which is repair and improvement to an existing municipal drain. And in this case, it's only a portion of the drain, which is in this, I'd say the middle portion. There is still drain downstream and upstream of this area, but there was a request and some concerns raised for the portions across lots 10 to 13. The last engineer's report for this portion of the drain was 1966. So the report itself is fairly old, but we don't know when the last maintenance was done on it. The requests for this area were basically sedimentation and low-grade crossings. We did do a survey and inspection of the drain. We did find that there is significant sediment buildup in certain areas, not all areas. There is erosion on the banks in certain places. There is a narrow cross-section through the bush area, and there is brush growing along the banks that's inhibiting the flow of the water. There are some low-grade crossings. Both of them currently have pipes in the bottom. One of them is obstructing flow to the point of enhancing some of the sedimentation that's occurring. So we did complete the design. We had a proposal. We reviewed that with the landowners. And basically, we are recommending mostly maintenance. We're not requiring to deepen the drain at all. Mostly removing sediment and brush. The two low-grade crossings will be worked on. The one low-grade crossing will be replaced with a concrete low-grade crossing with no pipe on it. And the other one will be removed as part of the project, and the landowner will replace it privately with a footbridge. So we'll be removing some of the obstructions. There is going to be some erosion control and environmental enhancements with buffer strips and some small things like that to improve the drain as well. So I would stop and open up to questions.
Questions from council? Anything you wish to clarify? Pretty straightforward. The resolution, please.
That the engineer's report for the Kettle Creek Drain be accepted, and that bylaw number 2293 being a bylaw to provide for the Kettle Creek Drain drainage works be read a first and second time and provisionally adopted.
Mover and seconder, Serna, Glinski, all in favor? Carried.
That the Court of Revision for the Kettle Creek Drain be scheduled to be held on January 5th, 2023 at 7:30 PM.
Mover and seconder, Lewis, Leach, all in favor? Carried. Next on the agenda is another meeting to consider, this time Prissy Line Drain. And Mike, you're going to do this one as well?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, this report was prepared in accordance with Section 4 of the Drainage Act for a new municipal drain. There is currently an existing drain there. It is an old tile drain that was constructed under the Ditches and Watercourses Act, so it's an award drain. It was constructed circa 1915 and consisted of 4 to 7 inch diameter drain. But the landowners in the area, and this is across lots 31 and 30 along Pressy Line, pretty much starting up closer to Pegram Line, heading downstream to an outlet in the Bear Creek. They requested that a proper up-to-date tile drain be constructed to provide a sufficient outlet for the tributary area that's served by the existing award drain. Our proposal includes constructing a new 200 millimeter to 375 millimeter drain along the south side of Pressy Line, as well as replacing, there's an existing road crossing across Pressy Line, so we'd be replacing that. And then destroying the old drain where we come across it. There would be some catch basins along Pressy Line where we'd be allowing some of the surface water to get into the drain where we can. The rest of the award drain is not going to be touched. It probably doesn't function that great for some of the landowners, so they would probably end up doing some private tiling, but it's not that the old award drain where we're not working is not part of this report. So I would stop and open up to questions.
Questions for Mike? Also pretty straightforward then. Go with the resolution.
That the engineer's report for the Pressy Line drain be accepted and that bylaw number 22-94 being a bylaw to provide for the Pressy Line drain drainage works be read a first and second time and provisionally adopted.
Mover and seconder, Glinsky, Leach, all in favor? Carried.
That the Court of Revision for the Pressy Line drain be scheduled to be held on January 5th, 2023 at 7:30 PM.
Mover and seconder, Lewis, Cerna, all in favor? Carried. Okay, I was gonna wish Mike Merry Christmas, but I think we just lost him.
Merry
So
Christmas,
next,
I'm here.
oh, there you are.
Yeah,
All
Merry
the
Christmas,
best.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Next is a presentation regarding Carter Road Bridge Rehabilitation Plan. This one will be done by Ryan. Yes, there he is. Over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. It's a pleasure to address you guys tonight. I'll give you just a short description of what we're doing. Earlier in the summer, we were selected to do the engineering for the Carter Road Bridge. Information that was provided to us at the time was an OSIM report prepared by MEDA, which recommended that the bridge either undertake a major rehabilitation or be replaced. During the course of us preparing our proposal, our opinion of the structure was that it was in better shape than what the OSIM had indicated. So part of our scope of work was to include a detailed condition survey. So when that work was done, samples were taken, detailed concrete analysis was done. And the great news is that our opinion was validated that the bridge is in much better shape than the original inspection had thought. Based on that, we went ahead and did a preliminary design report and had discussions with staff. And at the moment, the considered scope of work is to remove the wearing surface, do what we call a delamination repair to the deck, and then put waterproofing and a new surface on it to the soffit, various concrete repairs and crack injections, things of that nature. One of the good things with this structure is that the barrier is actually in good condition and doesn't need to be replaced at this time. So based on that, we have what we would term a minor rehab repair scope of work. That's relatively close to your budget that you had in mind, and the work that's intended to be done should purchase another 25 years of life for the structure before a full major rehab would need to be undertaken. I believe that Matt Sweetland had provided a summary report with some of the current drawings to you. So at this time, I'll conclude my remarks and open the floor to any comments and questions.
Comments, questions? Deputy Mayor Widner?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. What's the age of this bridge? Maybe it's in the report.
Constructed in 1965, through the chair.
65? Good year. Okay. That's had a good life, and so you're gonna prolong it by another 25, so our cheapest alternative and should be good.
Yes, through your worship, just an additional comment. This structure is in incredible condition, given its age, no doubt due to the usage of the road and the limited use of road salts. The chloride penetration test results were very, very good. So there's no doubt that this structure can last at least another 25 years if it's handled properly, perhaps even another 50.
Thank you. Good.
That's nice. We like good news. If there are no further questions, I'll thank you, Ryan, and have the resolution.
That the presentation from Ryan Elliott of Valley regarding the Carter Road Bridge Rehab Project be received, and that report number PW 22-68 entitled Carter Road Bridge Rehabilitation Plan be received, and that township staff be directed to include for the rehabilitation of the Carter Road Bridge in the 2023 capital budget.
Mover and seconder? Cerna, Glinsky, all in favor? Carried. Merry Christmas to you as well.
And Merry Christmas to you.
Okay, next on the agenda, another presentation. This time it is about water wastewater rate study. And I believe we have Daryl from Watson Associates.
Good evening, Madam Mayor.
Good evening, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share a presentation and kind of walk through some of the analysis we've been working on with staff. So can everybody see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So thank you to Madam Mayor. Thank you, Council, for having me here this evening virtually. So today we're going to go through a brief presentation, as I mentioned, outlining kind of the water and wastewater rate analysis that we've undertaken over the last 6 to 8 months working with township staff. And so I'll just briefly touch on kind of the purpose of the study, why we're doing it, a high-level overview of some of the legislation around water and wastewater that relates to how we prepare these rate studies and undertake the calculations. And then I'll briefly go through kind of the forecast of customers and billable volumes that we're anticipating, touch on the capital needs and the anticipated approach to financing those capital needs. Have a discussion a little bit on the anticipated operating expenditures, and then conclude with the anticipated rate forecast for both water and wastewater. And then I'm happy to stay on afterwards and answer any questions from council. So we're undertaking this rate study to update the township's water and wastewater rates. And as part of that study, we need to identify and update the anticipated capital needs to accommodate the municipality over the next 10 years. And then we're also going to look at identifying, as I mentioned, the financing approach for those capital needs. As part of this, we worked with staff to come up with what we think is a reasonable estimate of the operating costs over the next 10 years as well. And then ultimately come up with those recommended rates for council's consideration. So since the Walkerton crisis, there's been a number of pieces of legislation introduced, some fully introduced, some partially introduced. and kind of noted them here. You know, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Sustainable Water and Sewage Systems Act was introduced, but subsequently repealed. That really looked at trying to implement full cost user pricing models into municipal analysis. There's the financial plan regulations, Ontario Regulation 45307 under the Safe Drinking Water Act, which requires municipalities to prepare financial plans and submit them to the province. There's the Clean Water Act and the Water Opportunities Act. And then subsequently and more recently, there's the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act, and I'll kind of touch on how that's going to impact the municipality on a go-forward basis. So for the Water Opportunities Act, this was introduced in 2010. And what it was really trying to do is kind of foster some of these different innovative approaches for water, wastewater, and stormwater technologies and service delivery practices. Try to include some water conservation plans and try to come up with some targets for municipalities to try to establish and then try to meet those targets. And then it also included some rules around sustainability plans for water, wastewater, and stormwater services. Now, the only regulation that's been implemented related to the Water Opportunities Act is related to some technology acceleration project. And so, we would anticipate, once the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act is fully implemented, that we would see some of these regulations come forward. And so I'll just jump to the next slide here, and because really what kind of shapes how we prepare these rate studies and undertake the calculations is really a combination of what the previous legislations have tried to kind of put forth. And really what they look at is through the Water Opportunities Act, they were looking at including a financial plan requirement, which is more than the current financial plan requirement. So currently, under the Safe Drinking Water Act regulations, municipalities have to prepare financial plans. And really what it is it takes the information from our rate study that's included in the agenda package. And what we do with the rate study is we undertake the analysis on a cash flow basis. What this does is the financial plan takes it and puts it onto accrual basis, just accounting transition, which is the kind of requested format that the province would like the information provided in. And so what the Water Opportunities Act was really trying to do was to say, okay, well, let's do a full financial plan. Let's include asset management for the physical infrastructure, how you're going to replace those existing assets. They include a conservation plan, identify any risks that may interfere with the service delivery, and then some strategies for maintaining and improving that service delivery. And so in 2015, the province implemented the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act. And currently municipalities are working towards this July 25th goal of having all of the information under this legislation provided. And key to the water and wastewater rate study is really the not only identifying that current level of service, what the inventory is and the replacement cost, but identifying a financial strategy to ensure that the municipality is funding the ultimate replacement of that infrastructure. And so one of the things in preparing our rate study is to try to pull all this information together, look at your capital forecast, look at your operating forecast to see what does it cost to operate the system, and then also turn our minds to what is that life cycle cost or that replacement cost of your existing assets, because ultimately you're going to have to save up to replace those as well. And so what I'll do is just kind of step through our analysis. It's at a little bit of a higher level than you'll see in the rate study report as part of the agenda, but happy to answer any questions as we go through. So currently for water rates, The residents or the customers are charged on a fixed basis or base charge basis. So the quarterly base charge being $78.40. And then additionally on a volume charge basis. So based on how much volume the customer uses, that's $4.69 per cubic meter. For wastewater, it's a little different. It's just simply a fixed charge. And so a single family home, the quarterly fixed charge is $283. And then you can see we have some various other categories, and they're relative to how much we would anticipate they would consume or use in the wastewater system relative to a single family home. So you can see a duplex is twice the rate of a single family home. And then you can see the other categories there as well. In terms of existing customers, on the water side, there's 649 water customers. And then on the wastewater side, there's 293 existing customers. And my apologies if this slide shows up small on the screen there. But what we're doing as part of this is forecasting out over the next 10 years. And so the first table at the top there shows the existing number of customers as 649. And then what we do is we layer on the anticipated growth in the system over the next 10 years. And so what we're anticipating is going from about 649, 650 users over the next 10 years to go up to about 664 users. So adding a total of 15 users. The table underneath takes those number of customers and translates that into anticipated volume or billable volumes. And so currently we're at about 162,000 cubic meters of billable volumes. And by the end of the forecast, we're going to go up to about 165,000 is what we're anticipating. And to estimate how many new customers are going to join onto the system, really we sit down with staff, we talk about, if there's any development in the process, what's the historical number of customers added to the system to come up with those estimates. For wastewater, since the calculation or since the charge is a fixed charge, we have to undertake the calculation a little bit differently. And so I just wanted to explain that what you'll see in the rate study and in the calculations is what we've identified as a single family equivalent number of customers. And so really what we do is we take a specific category and we say, well, how does that equate to a single family home? So we can use that number as the denominator in our calculations. So for example, I mentioned a duplex is about twice the usage of a single family home. So they're weighted 2. So currently there's 3 duplexes, but they would equal 6 single family homes. So in total, when we undertake the calculations, we're looking at 300 single family equivalents. So when we looked at the capital needs, the capital forecast that's included in the study is based on the township's draft capital plan. And so we've taken that capital plan and utilized it. And as part of that, we're looking at what's the timing of this of the works, and then what are the costs associated with those works so that we can build out that forecast. And so what we're looking at, including 2022 out to 2032, we're looking at a total of about $3.7 million in works. And you can see there's a big portion of that, 1.63 million next year for the Talbot Street East project. And I'll show in a minute how that's funded, a large portion coming from grants. On the wastewater side, much smaller capital needs, we're looking at about $549,000 over the next, between 2022 and 2032. So when we're looking at how are we going to finance these capital projects, there's a number of ways in which municipalities may may consider funding capital. And so you can use existing reserves. You can use operating budget transfers. And so what that really means is just taking the money that you get from the rates, putting it into the bank account to save up to ultimately pay for those capital projects. You can use debts, you can use grants. If it's growth related, if the project is growth related, you could use development charges for that. And then the Municipal Act also allows you to impose capital charges if you're constructing works and existing homes are connecting into the system. Those existing homes can be charged a capital charge, similar to a development charge. Looking at the capital reserves at the end of 2021, since we started the analysis in 2022, at the year end 2021, there was just under $100,000 in the water capital reserve, and actually $860,000 in the wastewater capital reserve. And so when we looked at financing that capital program, there's really two sources. So there's the grant funding for the Talbot Street project of about $1.16 million. And then the rest of the water infrastructure is funded through the reserve. So using operating budget transfers to put the money into the bank to then pay for that infrastructure. And on the wastewater side, the entire capital program is anticipated to be funded from the reserve. So in terms of looking at your existing inventory, and this goes back to that, incorporating Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act into these calculations, we took a look at your existing inventory and what it would cost to replace everything. And so if we look at the total replacement value on the left of that chart, we see for water, there's a total value of about $17.4 million. For the wastewater, that's about $14 million. So in total, we're looking at water and wastewater assets worth about $31.54 million. So what we do is we'll look at how much of that is incorporated into the actual capital budget. And then on the far right, you'll see the annual life cycle replacement column. And what we're trying to do here is identify how much money should the municipality be putting away into that bank account to save up for the ultimate replacement of these assets. And so what we see is for water, that number is $234,000. And for wastewater, it's about $227,000. So technically, based on the analysis, if you put that money away every single year, ultimately when the existing inventory would need to be replaced, you should have the money in that bank account to replace that infrastructure without having to utilize debt. And so the other thing I wanted to point out on this slide really is that last bullet, which talks about that per customer investment. And so what we look at is what that total value of the inventory is on a per customer basis. And this really represents the cost to the municipality on a per customer basis to get the water to the customer and to take the wastewater from the customer and treat it. And so we're looking at for water, it's about $26,800 per customer. And on the wastewater side, a bit more expensive, $47,000 per customer. So when we're looking at the operating costs and how we're going to forecast that over the next 10 years, historically, we might have used something like, let's say 2% or 3% per year over the forecast, because long-term historical averages, it's about 2%. But given the current climate we're in right now with the higher inflation rates, what we've done is we've assumed a higher operating cost or higher inflation cost of 5% for 2 years, and then down to 4% for 2 years, 3%, and then 2% from 2029 onwards for the rest of the forecast. And so when we look at the water operating budget and how it changes over the 10-year forecast, The burgundy or reddish color at the top represents the capital related costs, or how much money we're anticipating putting into the reserve fund or the reserve to ultimately pay for those capital costs. And you can see it's steadily increasing over the forecast based on the capital program we've identified. And additionally, trying to put away more and more money into that bank account so that you do have money in there to replace the infrastructure in the future. On the operating cost side, you can see that's increasing generally based on those inflation rates that we've identified. On the wastewater side, you can see that increases a lot. It's not as steep, right? And that's because the two factors. The capital program is much smaller than the water capital program. And there's more money in the reserve fund at the beginning of the analysis relative to water. So when we're calculating these rates and we're balancing the analysis, we're taking into consideration a number of factors. And so we have included some assumptions on the rate increases for the primary and secondary systems. And so just to note, we're also currently working on the rate analysis for both secondary systems, the Elmer secondary system and the Port Burwell secondary system. And so our assumption on the purchase water costs that we're including in this analysis aligns with the rate increases we're anticipating with those secondary systems. We have to look at those reserve fund balances and how we're saving for the ultimate life cycle replacement needs. And then there's also some significant expenditures in a couple of the years for water. On the wastewater side, we're really, the increases are really looking at not just the operating costs, but trying to put money away in that reserve for the ultimate replacement of the infrastructure. On both water and wastewater, there's those higher than normal inflationary increases, which are also impacting that rate calculation. So what we're looking at for water is an annual average of about 4.1% increases per year. And then on wastewater, we're looking at about 3.5% increases per year. So in this slide for the water on the top table there, in 2022, we've identified kind of the current rates and what an annual bill would be for a typical residential customer that uses 200 cubic meters of water. And for them, the annual bill would be about $1,252. And so what we're looking at is increasing the base rate, that fixed amount, by 5% per year over the forecast period. And then the volume rate, we're stepping it up over time. So it's about 3% increases until 2028, 4% for a couple of years, and then 5% for the remainder of the forecast. And so in total, that annual bill is anticipated to increase about 3.5% until 2028, 4.5% for the next 2 years, and then 5% thereafter. On the wastewater side, the fixed charge, the total annual bill for a single family home is $1,132. And we're looking at increasing that by 3.5% per year over the forecast period. In terms of comparing the rates to neighboring communities, you'll see that Malahide is at the higher end of the rates, with the current rate being $1,252 for a typical residential customer that uses 200 cubic meters, and that would be increasing to that $1,313 for that typical residential customer. On the wastewater side, same thing. We're looking at going from that $1,132 per year up to $1,172 per year. So a $40 increase on the wastewater side. So for council's consideration, really consider that capital program and the operating program. Those are really, key inputs into the factors of the rates calculation that we do. And then also consider those proposed water and wastewater rates. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions from council.
Thank you so much. Lots of information, but very well laid out. I'll open it up for questions, and as I do that, I'll just remind council that we have this report as a specific item on the agenda where we'll be asked to adopt the study and the bylaws with the rates. But so for now, while we have Daryl with us, we can just make the most of his time with our questions, but we'll consider the resolution later on the agenda. Questions? Councillor Leach.
On now. How do you foresee development charges affecting the long-term ability to recover some costs with the new bill that's in the works that has been passed?
Through the chair. So with first, I'm assuming you're speaking to Bill 23.
Yes.
More, yeah. With respect to development charges, I think what we're seeing with some of these changes, there's a mandatory phase in. So whatever charges might be passed, let's say for water or wastewater, they would have to be phased in. So in the first year, you can only charge 80% of the calculated charge, and that increases 5% per year until you get to year 5, and then you're at your fully calculated charges. So with some municipalities, we've been doing an analysis. It's about the range of a 10% loss on what that total revenue could have been if there was no phase in. There's also a number of mandatory exemptions that are now added into the legislation. All in all, what we're seeing when you take into account everything, looking at probably in the range of 15 to 20% reduction in what you could have collected before they made the changes.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? So if I understand this study correctly, we have an aging system with not many more users to to pay for life cycle replacement. So that would be why some of the rate increases are not necessarily with following along inflation. Like we're hoping inflation will come down by 10 years from now, but that becomes irrelevant if we need to accumulate reserves to be prepared for the capital program, regardless of regardless of operating costs. Wow. So, any other questions? Deputy Mayor Widner?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jagger. I know years ago, they used to say you had to have so much water or so much money in reserves to cover a lot of this stuff. Is that still true to this day?
Through the mayor, I don't think there's any specific requirement on a minimum balance you have to have in your reserves. But I think it's, I think with the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act requirements that'll come in the middle of 2025, you're going to have a full financial strategy on how you're going to replace all these assets. And so you'll have to start saving no matter what. That'll have to be built in specifically into the analysis to ensure that when those assets are due, you have the ability to pay for them. But I don't think there's a requirement to have a specific minimum amount in your capital reserves.
Yeah, they used to say you had to have enough money. There's no excuse, have enough money in the account to fix whatever you need to fix. And that was kind of right after Walkerton. I was here then, and yeah, don't use money as an excuse for repairs and things. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that overall principle probably still holds. Anything else? Okay. Oh, one more comment, Daryl.
And thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to note, and I'm sure this probably came up in or will come up through some of the education pieces, but Yeah, and the significance of saving for the replacement of those assets and not having a very small balance in the reserve is, councils are financially liable if there is an issue with the system, right? If you're not repairing or replacing infrastructure and there is an issue, then councils can be liable for that. So that's why, we're always suggesting to increase those transfers to save, to have money in that reserve. So you have the ability to react if there is an issue, if something breaks, et cetera.
And if I may, the asset management program that is now being mandated, is that separate from I want to say the other asset management for the other capital assets of the municipality? So we're having to run kind of two programs at the same time, or in parallel, I guess, with two separate ministries. Is that helping or complicating things?
To you, Madam Mayor, so that I think, so the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act is really looking at having that full financial strategy on how you're going to replace your assets. I think as part of the water and wastewater analysis, we're trying to have full cost recovery on the by utilizing the rates. And so I think the asset management requirements will have to be built into the rates anyways, right? And so although there's the requirement to undertake a financial plan, and I think that's what you're referring to, I think the financial plan really just takes the way that we undertake this rate analysis. We really just take this cash basis analysis and move it to an accrual basis, and then that meets the requirement of the financial plan. So,
okay, Councilor Glinski.
Madam Mayor, what did he mean when he said liable or liability? What kind of liability are we looking at?
Can you comment on that, Daryl?
Sure. So through the mayor, there is, and I'd have to pull up the specific section, but there is the wording in the legislation that does speak to the fact that if there is an issue with a water system, let's say, and something like Walkerton happens again, that councils can be or may be financially liable if there is an issue. I think to date, there has not been any penalties or anything assessed on any municipalities. But that is always a risk that council should consider when they're looking at the funding of the capital plans.
Thank you. And Sam, you wanted to add something?
Yes, thank you, through your worship. Yeah, I was just going to add, it's section 19 under the Safe Drinking Water Act, the standard of care, which kind of outlines the council's responsibility as the owners of the system to ensure we're remaining financially viable, planning for future operating. It doesn't necessarily, the liability is referring to the fact that if there's a potential for an adverse impact to the water system or something that we could foreseeably, know this could have health implications or adverse impact to the users, then in that event, it is unacceptable to deny the funds. If we have a repair or something that's adverse, it has to be rectified and there's no excuse. You find the money and you fix the problem. So I think that's where the liability issue comes, was just the fact that we are fiscally responsible and financially responsible to repair something with a potential adverse impact.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councilor Glinski?
Yes.
Yeah. No messing around. That's for sure. It's serious business. Okay, well, if that's all, then I will thank you, Daryl, for this really clear presentation. Much appreciated, and best wishes to you as well. Have a great Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to council. Have a good night.
Okay, and we will deal with the resolution related to this study later on the agenda. So we'll move right away to our next presentation, our next guest, I believe, from Catfish Creek. And we're going to suggest that you sit just near a microphone so everyone online can also hear you. Great. Sure, Adam, would you like to do the introduction?
Thank you, your worship. So if council will recall last meeting, a report was presented with regards to the ice breaking and the procurement of machinery to mitigate the flood events. And there's a staff recommendation of procuring the long arm excavator based on the tender results. So council deferred the decision for one meeting to seek further conversation with the Catfish Creek Conservation Authority. And Dusty Underhill and Peter DeGrunis have gratefully offered to provide some information that was added as an addendum to the agenda, as well as make a presentation on their advice and perhaps answer any questions or comments from council.
Great, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation. I know it was very short notice and we're getting into vacation time and all of that, so truly it is appreciated. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, your worship and council. It's a pleasure being here tonight. Yes, so I guess we can get right to it. Basically, over 38 years, we've worked with a drag line, and that is our preferred piece of equipment. We don't assume cost, and we understand that. Not necessarily because something becomes financially unviable doesn't mean it's still not the best tool for the job. And the Conservation Authority Act just basically states that we are to advise on what the best tool is, or prefer, or suggest, whatever word you would prefer. So basically, over the course of time, we're using the historical knowledge of Peter's been with the Conservation Authority for 22 years. And I think the dragline was used for an accumulation of 38 times. And a lot of times over those years, it did mitigate. We don't guarantee any piece of equipment. We can't. It could be operator error, there could be equipment error, anything can happen. So again, all we do is basically state what the best piece of equipment from the Conservation Authority's perspective is a drag line. And that's what I guess we're here to talk about tonight. So if anybody has any questions or concerns, Peter is a wealth of knowledge. So I brought, you're only as smart as the people you work for. So I brought Peter tonight, that's for sure.
Whoa. I concur.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that, first introductions. I'll turn it over to council for questions and clarification. Deputy Mayor Widner.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going back to the report that was done probably early summer, late spring. I guess you guys were involved with that report.
Yes.
One of the questions was about the drag line. And at that time, you kind of didn't support it. What's changed in the meantime?
No, we still supported it. It's just basically that statement. I think you're referring to the one where we just can't guarantee the use of any equipment, especially with environmental impacts that were presented during the last flood.
Yeah, just that the drag line is therefore considered less effective. Moving on about the long reach excavator. Now you seem to say, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there because it's a mixed message to me.
Yeah, no, basically all our conversations between staff during any consultations, we supported the drag line. And during our, I think it was a September 15th or 17th, 2022 council report. We also, it states in there under further clarification on flooding, I think in the first or third paragraph, that we still support a drag line and do think it is the tool for the job.
Okay, I'm not reading that in the report, but that's fine. I do know now there was the suggestion brought to me by a long-term residents of Fort Bruce that the drag line maybe is a bit more effective on getting the ice out at the south end because they can throw the big heavy ball and smash it. But is there any credence to that? Or I mean,
there's in the operation of the drag line versus a hole, the drag line should be stationed generally at the end of the break wall, and it's able to reach across the entire mouth of the harbor, and that ice, I guess, the ice will never, you'll never bail that ice out of there. The ice has to go out to the lake, and if there's lake ice out there, the ice has to go underneath the lake ice. So the drag line pounds it and current takes it out. As it's pounding it, it can also drag along the bottom if there is any kind of ice damming there. So when it drags that out, it also could throw it out to the end of the break wall, because that's a natural current curls around the break wall. So as it throws it out onto the ice of lake ice, the weight of the lake ice breaks that up and allows for an avenue for the ice in the harbor to move out. So the biggest thing a drag line can do efficiently is it pushes the ice down, drags it out and tosses it out, and it also reaches across the entire width of the harbor. That's the preferred, that's why historically we've been using, we prefer the drag line as opposed to a long reach, which is basically bailing. And it doesn't reach across the entire harbor.
Not at the ends, but it does in the middle.
We did a measurement today on the GIS program and it's roughly 32 meters across the harbor. And I think that the long reach is only 60 meters. So a lot of the ice is, 60 feet. It's 132 meters across, so roughly 104 feet. And the drag line reach, long reach is only 60 feet in length. So there's clearly almost a 40 some odd foot void. Now the ice gets broken up on the other side by the long reach, but he can't reach over to grab it. He'll use a motion and create a wake, and it goes through across the channel and hits the wall and it breaks the ice up on the other side, but there's no way to manipulate that ice out of the harbor.
Yeah, thank you.
And there are drone pictures of the 22 flooding in February, where the long reach is only clearing half the harbor. It does not reach the far side. And it's jammed along there. So you're basically allowing only half the volume of water out.
Okay. Thank you.
An open channel is ideal in a flooding situation. It's almost imperative. An open channel and a little bit of egress at the lake, which when he casts that ice out on top of the lake ice, it puts pressure on the lake ice and it will break it up quicker, creating a bigger void for that ice to come out and migrate around the end of the break wall.
And we do understand that we're here just for the drag line, not just for the drag line, sorry, the preference in equipment. And we do understand the fiscal constraints you're under. So it's just I don't know, saying recommend or whatever, there's all kinds of words thrown around and everything like that. But the preferred piece of equipment to mitigate ice jamming in Port Bruce for 38 years historically has been a drag line.
The costs before too associated when we shopped around were roughly, I think, 1920. And then year 20 and 21 wasn't much more than $15,000 locally from local dragline operators. Higgs Construction was one year and Higgs was another year. Between the two, they did those years, and then Lamers took over the 21-22 year. So that was, I think, the first time in my knowledge that it was just an excavator on site.
Okay.
Now, using the drag line, there's no guarantees. I know Dustin talked about operator and equipment, but Mother Nature has everything to do with it. And there's no way we can guarantee you that a drag line will prevent flooding, because we have had flooding with the drag line, but we've never had the kind of flooding that was last year. A lot of people look at the volume of water. Well, an issue with flooding in Port Bruce is I guess it is the volume, but it's a lack of volume. Believe it or not, the place is flooded, chest high, but it's a lack of volume. The amount of volume that comes down the creek during these ice jamming and flooding events is in the neighborhood of a 2 to 5 year return period. which is hydrologically speaking, nothing. The issue becomes thickness of the ice. We've had an ice jam. I forget what year it was, 6 inches of ice. We've had flooding with 6 inches of ice. It's just that there isn't enough pressure to move that ice through. Plus, Catfish Creek itself morphologically is, it's a low gradient stream. It's sinuous, and you just don't have the hydraulic push to move those ice jams that start up at the top end and stop all the way through town till it gets out to Rockenmore Bay. It's the nature of the beast. And for our experience, the drag line has mitigated and lessened the flooding.
So if I may just clarify something, I think I heard, maybe you implied that the flooding was greater this past time, which was the first time that the drag line was not used at all. So there's a bit of a correlation implied here. So that's why, so I just want to go back to the report from April, after the town hall, where you stated that it is the opinion of Catfish Creek Conservation Authority that such a statement, being that a drag line was more effective in the past, such a statement cannot be made conclusively because ice jams and floods conditions vary annually.
Sure.
And then you also, I want to compare the next statement. It should be noted that with the use of the long reach excavator, the arbor was clear of ice when the flooding occurred. So,
Well,
but
the harbor
yeah.
being clear of ice when the flooding occurred. That would have referred to the ice, the initial ice in the harbor, the breaking of the ice, prior to the flooding. So the ice is broken up and the hole would have taken that out. That's what that would have referred to. And so, yeah, it could have been clear, but it doesn't have, the equipment isn't there to deal with the ice once the ice starts coming down. The ice in the harbor, when you're just breaking it up or trying to remove it prior to flooding, that's a relatively easy thing to do. It's when that ice starts moving and all the woody debris starts coming down and all the docks and everything that you see, boats start coming through there, that the drag line is able to mitigate it easier. I don't know, better, but easier, better, sure. So if you're just talking about clearing the harbor, it's one thing. If you're talking about mitigating the ice or flooding when the ice is moving through the system, it's another thing.
And pardon, can you also comment then on the bit of, to me, it's a bit mixed message, because in April, what we heard was that the drag line was not considered more effective. Like that statement you said cannot be made conclusively. But I think tonight I'm hearing that from your experience, a drag line is more effective. So which
Well, I'm
one?
not gonna,
Yeah.
you won't get it out of me that
Historically, it
no.
has been more effective for mitigating. It has never mitigated fully. There's no potential. It could do one way or the other in a major flood, but historically, it has done a decent job in the past.
I'll never say that the drag line is the end of all equipment, right?
And you can appreciate we're looking for guidance because we have a choice to make. So we're looking for which one is better.
Well, I guess.
So we want to clarify if you are in fact saying that from your experience and is that it is, you do consider it
Yeah.
better.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and then I guess if you look at, I know there's data things about data and historic and everything, et cetera. I've been at it for 22 years, as Dusty's saying. About 16 of those years, Kim Smale has been doing it, and the drag line has been the preferred piece of equipment. And it just does, it does the job.
So can you tell us about what it doesn't do? I'm assuming, and I think you referred to the fact that no machine is perfect, no solution is perfect. So what are the downsides of the drag line?
Well, you know, I guess if you look at the 22 flooding that happened, again, 38 years of using a drag line, or 37 years using a drag line, and 1 year there wasn't a drag line. I don't know.
Okay, so what are things that the drag line can't do?
In our perspective, there's not much. Like, it again, it justified its being down there for so many years, or we would have switched out equipment. It was basically there after the flood of 1982, I believe. It's with the year or two after they started using it then, and it basically didn't change over the test of time. Sometimes they would bring in their Mr. Lamers, and long reaches were called in to provide relief on different years if they thought there might be a jam happening elsewhere, and that might be a downside to a drag line. It doesn't move as fast. You're not going to roll that across town to Levi Street and break anything up on a corner. That's true, and a long reach will move a bit quicker. So there's pros and cons to both, definitely.
A long reach bails, it bails the ice out a lot quicker. But that's not gonna mitigate the ice. The ice has to go out into the lake. You'll never bail out 6,000 or whatever truckloads of ice and hope the town won't flood. That ice has to go underneath the lake ice and out.
We have some really good photos that a resident had taken with a drone right after the flood, and it can actually show how the ice has migrated. And the end definitely was probably jammed up, and ice was not being allowed over because the impact at the beginning of the break ball of ice overlapping that and going up to the beach side was unbelievable. So something was holding that ice back on the end of the pier. It wasn't allowing it to go out like it normally does and around to the east. So a drag line in that perspective, it could get out there and pull that shelf out because it doesn't just break what's on top, it can reach right to the bottom. So if there is an ice shelf out there, a drag line can get out to break that free to allow that other ice to migrate out.
So it's basically, like I say, it's push, drag, and throw. Those are, you know, push the ice under, drag the bottom. So if there's any kind of damming of the ice at the harbor mouth, and whatever comes out, it tosses it out onto the lake ice. Break that up, and once that's broken up, the ice migrates around the southern end of the break wall, and that's the natural, unless there's a wind from the east, right? So, but that's a natural migration, and this year you can see all that, and the ice, the harbor was broken out to the end, but there's no movement there. There's nothing happening. It curls around the end of the harbor.
Other comments or questions? Now, can we agree from a scientific research? So 1 year with the long arm is not and to say that there was, you know, this flood like you've never seen, would you agree that if we also agree that each flood is unique, and I think that is something you've stated, nothing can be anticipated, and no machine is going to be perfect. And technically in our data, we're trying to look at, you know, data and evidence of which, you know, piece of equipment is better. And technically we only have 1 year of data on which had its own unique weather, you know, patterns and ice formations patterns. And then that happened to be the year that we had the long arm. So would you agree that that's insufficient to make a conclusion truly about which machine is better?
like the
Like-
severity of the flood is
Yeah.
insufficient to make that assumption. Anything could happen with any piece of equipment at any time.
Right.
It's just, our historical thoughts are the drag line is best just because it's mitigated for years and years and years. It's provided very good relief over time.
Counselor Cerna.
Oh, sorry. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Peter, lake level has, that has an effect on the severity of flooding as well, does it not?
It's a lot of factors, and lake level definitely is a factor. And last year, lake levels were down by a foot.
And what are they this year?
I couldn't tell you right now what they are. They're around, I don't want to say, I couldn't tell you exactly what they're. I don't look at them on a regular basis. I sort of pay attention more to that one as it gets closer to the flood season, yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Lewis.
Through you to Peter or Dusty. Thanks for coming out. I appreciate it. I'm wondering if on Catfish's opinion on the south or the north end of the break wall, where there was supposed to be an opening when they did that break wall to cross to the east. There's where the land before, like where the break wall ends and the end of the cliff, that land in there. They said the report back then that they were going to clear that to make that lower, so that could be an exit. Is that something that we need to fall back on and say we need to finish that, as what that engineer said with that report? Would that help litigate and get water out if that area was lower?
That was cleared out for vegetation. I think that's what we talked about in that report, was to clear out the vegetation.
Yes.
There is on YouTube, you can take a look at a drone being flight of the harbor after the day after. And that overflow area at the end of Rockabor Bay, it worked really well. You take a look at the amount of ice and debris that it went through there, and also through that hole in the break wall, they both worked really quite well.
So if I may clarify, is that spillway, the work for that spillway, has that been completed? Because I think in April in that report, we said it was not completed. So
I
just
think
wanted to clarify.
Catfish had made a recommendation that the spillway should be cleared out, but I'm not sure where it went from there.
Cleared out for
Okay.
vegetation is what we were looking at. That was the Malahide project, so.
Right. Counselor Wilson.
Through you, Madam Mayor, what are the municipal responsibilities for harbor upkeep? Because if we have to keep the harbor up and dredge it every so often, are we not just saving ourselves the expense by having the drag line there to do it for us? But I don't know what the municipal responsibilities are on that sort of keeping the navigable waterway.
When you refer to dredging, you're referring to the dredging of sediment in the channel, or the ice?
Well, when you said you're clearing the bottom of the channel, I'm assuming that drag line's not necessarily never touching bottom.
Right, exactly.
You know, and if it's clearing stuff out and that's something that we have to pay to do every so often, then yes, it's an expense to have it down there for the ice removal. But if making sure the mouth of the harbor is navigable, and that's an expense that we have, then maybe we're killing two birds with one stone by having the drag line there. But I don't know what the municipal responsibilities are for keeping the harbor open for, you know, I know it's not quite the marinas and stuff that Port Stanley has, but there's a pile of boats up in there. But I don't know if we have any of those, if we're responsible for any of keeping it cleared.
So can I confirm first off that there is that kind of additional bonus by moving the ice with the drag line, that you're indirectly dredging a little bit? Is that
if we-
correct?
If we look at the, like, from a research perspective, that's an assumption. So I can't vouch for that one, no.
Adam?
If I may, through your worship, and maybe deferring to Catfish Creek, and when Councillor Wilson refers to the municipal responsibilities, it may be, is there conservation authority responsibilities in that effect because it's a waterway, or is it a municipal responsibility?
That's Government of Canada navigable waters. We have no responsibility for navigable waters.
And I believe that even the dredging has been deemed maybe up until now not necessarily needed because of the flow of sediments, the cycle of sediments flowing through. So there isn't, it's not in the budget or a responsibility. It's not a problem, right, that I'm aware of that needs to be addressed. Councillor Cerna and Councillor Glinsky.
Yeah, thank you. Through Madam Mayor to back to Peter. Today I was in attendance as a guest at the Catfish Creek meeting. And you talked about dredging that one spot on the just east of the Port Bruce Bridge.
Where we used to dredge.
Where you used to dredge, and you explained what happened there because of the width of the creek and everything like that. So I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind telling everybody exactly here what happened and why dredging sometimes just isn't the answer.
And if I may, just before you answer, because I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to keep the conversation related to the drag line. And if there's a connection between dredging and drag
Okay,
line and ice
sure.
breaking. Those are really good points.
I'm
and
sorry.
Good questions, but we could have a really long conversation and we still have a lot of the agenda to go through, if that's okay. But if there was a comment, if there's a link between ice jamming and the level of sediments that you see at the moment and that you've observed, and Peter, if you want to comment on that, that would be fine.
Well, a study done in I forget the exact date, 2012 exactly. Riggs Engineering indicated that the Catfish Creek is in a state of equilibrium, meaning what comes in goes out to the lake. So the dredging component, in theory, the creek looks after itself. We used to dredge in one area. I don't know if that was the best thing that was done, because two things slow down water quickly: width and depth. And so the place that we dredged at is already wider and it already slowed down the water, causing an ice jam. And then we dredged there, so the depth, so you double stopping the ice. So, and I did one time, I looked at how much we dredge out of there, and if I distribute that over the entire reach of the Catfish from the dredging area out to the harbor, it only added a few centimeters, or took out a few centimeters. It was really wasn't,
Thank you for that. So last question, perhaps Councillor Glinsky.
Madam Mayor. Caught myself. We used to be able to get a grant for dredging, and I understand what Peter said, but however, everything that you take out leaves room for water to go through. So that dredging, obviously, I don't think hurt, and I don't understand why the government cut off the grants. Thank you.
Thank you. And like I said, we'll keep the conversation on ice breaking and drag line, because dredging, I think, could be on a future agenda if there's interest. Deputy Mayor Widner, did you have one last comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Gazier. Going back to the day of that storm, that was an exceptional event. I know you said that the water wasn't a big deal, but it really was, because I got called out several places, North Malahide, where the water's 2 feet long over the road.
could be.
And the
Could be.
fields were flooded, and so we figured you were gonna get it, but it was a good snowpack, it got warm. And everything just left in a big time, but. One thing we haven't discussed though is there's a great big weight ball for that drag line, and it has some value to it, I guess. I've watched it work. I've been through a lot of floods, because I used to live down that way, and to say that we still had flood when we had the drag line. That's correct, right?
Mhm.
But that big weight ball does help. I mean, he can go farther with that. But there was a lot of water that day, so I don't know. Every storm's different. That's correct.
Well, the volume of water, we measure the volume of water. And like as I say, it wasn't a 5-year event, so
No?
yeah, the volume of water really isn't anything to say, wow. That was a lot of water coming down. It seemed like a lot of water because it jammed in town and then it just flooded. So, but the actual measured volume going by wasn't that great.
Okay, well, once again, thank you. This
Yep.
was very helpful to have and we needed to have a more informed discussion, and we will again be dealing, I think that's the next item in the more formal agenda. But so you're welcome to stay, but this is your last chance to speak though.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Council. And if there's anything else you need from Catfish Creek, our door is always open.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
So the next item on the agenda, we'll move into the section on reports from departments. And we will start with the follow-up report regarding ice breaking services. And Jeff, you'll start with that, or Adam?
Yeah, thank you, your worship. So as I introduced Catfish Creek, council will recall that this matter was deferred at the last meeting. I have listening to Catfish Creek and corresponding with them since last meeting. It's staff's opinion that we do appreciate, respectfully appreciate Catfish Creek's opinion in the use of a drag line. However, the township staff that are most knowledgeable and experienced with the annual flooding practices, and this has been stated in previous reports, including that April report to the public. It was a joint report put together by Catfish Creek staff with Peter and Dusty, as well as township staff, that for township staff's opinion, do prefer the use of a long arm excavator for its mobility and precision with regards to ice breaking. There are pros and cons to each. Any one flood event, weather event for that matter, is different. But what we do know is that when we were comparing or open to the suggestion of using two machines, we were basing the expectation off that known costs from previous years. There were two different types of machines that sought the same purpose and outcome. When we went out for tender, it needed to be tendered twice. And council is aware of the significant increases in cost in what council may not be aware of is the previous years and their significant increases based on prior years. The drag line is, and this was stated in last week's council meeting, upwards of, for the quoted costs, the overall cost, twice as much as a drag line. The drag line would be twice as much as a long arm excavator. So we have reviewed this. We're not discounting the pros of a drag line. What we are looking at is the long arm excavator, and it's not just any excavator. It would be a long arm excavator. It does reach across approximately 60% of the channel. That was noted by Catfish Creek here. So on this basis and the comment, and we've reviewed, and again, it's not discounting a drag line, but especially based on costs, it's staff's opinion as presented and recommended in the report, the use of a long arm excavator. So open to any comments or questions. And I'm sure that there may be, but yes, we're still recommending the long arm.
Questions, comments? Councilor Sarno.
Refresh my memory, how much money would be saved by going with the long reach over the drag line?
So it was the tender quotes received were based on operating and standby costs. The long arm quoted an estimate of approximately 58,000, just over, I think it was maybe close to 59,000. The drag line was upwards of $96,000 or $98,000. So the costs have increased for both, but exceptionally more so for the drag line.
But we're talking $40,000.
Difference.
Sorry. We're talking a $40,000 difference. So if there happens to be a flood and we went with the cheaper route, that $40,000 is gonna look pretty piddly to the people of Port Bruce and whatever. That we saved 40 grand, and yet it's got last storm, I believe, cost them $2 million in damages. So, you know, that's something we got to think about as well.
And through you, your worship, council's intention going into this, or the resolution, the direction given was 2 machines, so a drag line and a long arm excavator. The long arm, what's putting pressure on some of these contractors is that there is plenty of work elsewhere in gravel pits and other construction projects. So in prior years, and I'm only hypothesizing, there may have been the flood season may have been a down point in these contractors' year. In this case, they can work 365 days a year, and they could be busy elsewhere as well in a period in the months of January, February, and March. So we're seeing we've witnessed significant cost increase. So having 2 machines there is going to be upwards of taking the $96,000 to $98,000 and adding the $58,000 as well as a long arm excavator. So I don't know if it's exactly $40,000.
Yeah, okay. Follow up, man. The follow up to that through Madam Mayor is the fact that, like, I'm not convinced we need 2 anymore. I think we should just be going with the 1 machine. And based on what I heard and I've read from other people, if we're going to go with 1 machine, to me, it spends the 40,000 and get the drag line. That's just my opinion.
Councillor Lewis.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So is it also to my understanding that the quote we got for our drag line was a quote as though there was something that happened? That is not the price, I understand, that we would pay if we don't have a flood. So we're told $96,000, but that's if something goes on. If nothing goes on, I don't believe it still costs us $96,000.
Yeah, so through you, the quotes that came in factored in, and it was the same. There was unit prices for both standby costs, operating costs, move in and move out costs, and there was emergency costs if they were needed after the 3 months period. So the quotes received were all inclusive of those unit rates. What you're suggesting, Councillor Lewis, is right. There could be a scenario where nothing happens. There's no operating costs needed. So the council would only be incurring the standby costs. But there's also a likelihood that more than those operating units could occur, right? So the quotes that were in front of council, the grand totals were an assumption of so many operating costs, move in, move out costs, and standby costs for both machines.
And if I may comment too, that we have to be careful about making the assumption about one being better, one being inferior. So to me, the cheaper is, I'm not hearing any conclusive evidence that the cheaper one is the inferior solution. So to your point, Councillor Cerna, you're saying, like, if there's a flood and we went with the cheaper version, that would not be good. But what if that was the better equipment? I think we have 2 pieces that we're considering. On the equipment, I'm not hearing any conclusive evidence about one is best and one is better. On the other hand, there is a difference in price. So we have to take that into consideration. Councillor Cerna.
I just heard a report from Catfish Creek, and they were hesitant to make a distinct whatever recommendation. But I thought I heard them say that the Long Reach would be their preferred piece of equipment. Is that not what I heard?
I
Or
think
dra-
they said dragline.
Yeah, what
Yes.
did I say?
Long Reach.
Oh, jeez.
Just,
No,
to-
no.
just to make it clearer.
I'm glad. I'm just saying if you guys are actually listening to me or what. But I just,
They said preferred, but they're
Preferred.
not able.
and so if this is the machine they prefer, to me, that's probably a fancy way of saying, if you guys are gonna do it and do it right, get the preferred job.
That would be your interpretation. But other comments? Counselor Glinski.
Madam Mayor, first of all, they said that, first of all, they said that, the flood path really worked. That worked so well, why did it flood? Secondly, they said that the ice in the creek was broken up. Again, if it was broken up, why did it flood? Probably because the ice jammed a little further back. Now, if we had the Long Reach or maybe two of them cleaning out at the bend, maybe we wouldn't have had the flood because the creek was clear, according to what they said, and there was water flowing over the spillway. So there we go.
I mean, while you're pondering this, I will say that the not having conclusive evidence and solid data one way or the other, what caused the flood, I mean, we've been looking at this since the flood, right? And there are so many factors. So I think one conclusion and one thing we'll have to look into is do a proper study. And we will need to have a good discussion with Catfish Creek. It is their responsibility. We were talking about, responsibilities and jurisdictions. Clearly flood mitigation and even prevention, if you look at their mandate, is their responsibility. We need more data. Everybody is going on observations, anecdotal, and we're talking about safety of our residents. We're talking about lots of money. So, I mean, really, we owe it to our residents to be basing our decisions on more data. So as an aside from the decision this evening, I think one recommendation will be to look into a study. Councillor Leach.
Is anyone here able to speak to, is the long arm able to clear the mouth of the channel so that the ice can clear out into the lake better?
Councillor Cerna.
Thank you, Mayor. Listening to his presentation, he was saying that with the drag line, they could clear out farther into the lake so that the ice could go down underneath and make the corner, which the Long Reach backhoe won't do that. I believe at least that's what I heard. Thank you.
Adam.
And council did hear Mr. Dragruna state that his preference is that the long arm excavator or the drag line has the weight that can push down, pull up and throw out at the end of the pier those ice blockages. So in Catfish Creek's opinion, as was just stated a few moments ago, their preference at the end of the pier is the drag line.
So follow-up question, if, is there some capacity for the Long Reach hoe to be able to do some of that mitigation? Not, obviously not as well as the drag line, but even a small portion?
I'm through you, your worship, I'm looking at Director Spur and Director Sweetland. It would certainly be able to do somewhat of but I am no expert in that regard. Jeff or Matt, if you have anything to add.
Yes, through you, your worship. The two pieces of equipment operate very differently, as Catfish Creek mentioned. So it's largely dependent on what circumstance we're looking at. In the February 2022 event with 18 inches of ice is a different event than the 6 inches of ice that Mr. Dragonis mentioned as well. So every circumstance is different that we're looking at here. And there are two pieces of equipment that do two very different things. The long arm excavator was chosen as a reduced cost at the time and can do the job of clearing the harbor that was mentioned. Again, works for a specific flood event, possibly not a different flood event. So it's which one is being looked at.
And if we only had a crystal ball to see what kind of winter we're going to have. So no matter what, it is going to be a best guess, no matter what. Deputy Mayor Widner.
Yes, thank you. Mayor Jared, through you to Jeff. I know there's been a lot of talk that the hole won't reach over to that break wall. Well, it certainly does. There's pictures to prove it, I believe. I have one. But I think the harbor was clear, we're told, right? So every flood seems to be, it blocks up at the north end and needs that push to get through to clear all, and there's usually a lot of crap in it, like trees and picnic tables and boats and, but it's hard to get it to go under the ice. So I don't know,
Yeah, there was a lot of things like when it did break up, the ice did break up last year before the flood. The whole channel all the way to the end of the pier was clear, both sides, right from seawall to seawall. Like Matt mentioned, too, with 18 inches of ice, if you just do the math for how many kilometers of ice that is, I think Peter mentioned it was like 6,240 something truckloads. Even, I'm not saying whether either machine's better or not. I don't think either machine would have probably had the capability of pushing that ice under as it came down with a short amount of time, right? So once it stopped, and there's so many different variables in this. Whether the equipment, I think, is the smallest piece, but we're making a big part of it, but it is the smallest piece of it. Is whether it's, we've had floods as well. 2008, we've had two, or 2015 or whatever, we had two numerous floods over the years with the drag liners regardless as well. And as the mayor mentioned, that we maybe do not have enough data or enough reasoning why, I don't think the piece of equipment had its fair shake either. So
no, we're limited to how far we can go either way.
yes,
And you're not gonna do it, anything. There's no machine out there to do that.
no.
Thank you.
Okay, so we were able to defer this item last time because we had a little bit of runway left. We have no runway left. We have to make a decision for the sake of the safety of our residents. There has to be a piece of equipment. I think we're all in agreement on standby at Catfish Creek and in Port Bruce. So do you feel what is being proposed by staff? So in the report, actually, Allison, if you want to read the resolution so you can all hear what is being proposed.
The report number F 22-18 entitled Follow-up Report Emergency Management Ice Breaking Services be received, and that Malahide Township as the benefiting municipality does hereby accept the quotation submitted by Lamers Excavating to provide ice breaking services in Port Bruce from January 1st to March 31st, 2023 be accepted.
Okay, so I'll ask for a mover and seconder, and then we can have further, a little bit more discussion if needed before the vote. But for now, I'd like to be able to dispose of this resolution. So could I have a mover and seconder? Leach? Seconder? Widner? So it's on the table. Any final questions or comments you want to add before the vote? Councillor Glinsky.
Madam Mayor, the problem appears to be on the bend. And I was just wondering if there's a second long reach hole that could be called in to clear out or help break up the ice at the bend. Because the creek was clear here. That's what Peter stated. The water was flowing over the overflow. it shouldn't have been a problem, but yet it was. So where was it held up? It was held up at the bend. So that's my thought on it. A second long reach.
Which could possibly be considered in addition to a long reach. Other final comments, Deputy Mayor Widner?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Zier. I agree with having the second machine there. Just for the fact machines break. We've seen that drag line break before. Well, if that thing goes down when it's critical, what's our backup? I'd almost like to see 2 long reaches there, a long reach we can get really quickly if we need it, because that drag line is old and machines do break. Look at the complex. We can't have a Zamboni that's 5 years old, but we're gonna put a 20-year-old drag line down there. So that's a concern I have. Thank you.
So just so I'm clear, so the idea would be to support this motion, but then for staff to inquire about the possibility of having somebody else available, not on site, not on standby, but finding out if needed, somebody, a second machine could be called upon. Is that what you're suggesting? Okay, so we have a mover and seconder. So can we have a vote? Those in favor? So this is for the long arm, as recommended by township staff in the report. So those in favor? Opposed? Okay. Can we do that again? Because I know my eyes aren't good, but so those in. That's at the wish of council. If you want to request. Would you like to request recorded vote? The motion on the. So I just wasn't clear that everybody had voted. So the motion on the table is for a long arm for the Lamers contract to be approved and for staff to go ahead with the contract with Lamers for the long arm. So that's what's on the table.
That's an amended, I think that's.
Yeah, we, who moved the,
Sarah and Mark.
Sarah and Mark. So would you be willing to accept a friendly amendment to add that and that staff inquire about a second long arm being available? Adam?
What I might like to speak to is we are aware that there is a significant difference between a long arm excavator and any other excavator for that matter. Lamers has a long arm excavator and has one of them. It's unknown where a second, who operates or how far it is away from the township, a second long arm excavator. Director Sweetland, Director Sport, if there's any idea of the proximity or availability of a second long arm, that's something that we can certainly explore. There's no harm in reaching out. What I would like to note for council's information from a procurement perspective is the fact that the tender that went out asked for a long arm excavator and a drag line. If council is looking for a second excavator, a long arm excavator, that would be considered doable. You're dismissing the need for a drag line. You can move and change the need for a second non-drag line piece of equipment. That is, as far as I know, that is allowable under our procurement policy. What isn't allowed is if you want to try and find a cheaper drag line, that is because you've procured and we got one bid, that is something that council is not advisable to do through its procurement policies.
So right now, we're not in a position to confirm whether a second long arm is a possibility. So would you be prepared to still go ahead with this motion in the event that there is a possibility that we will not find a second one available? And because we can't bring resolution to that question. So the resolution would still be just that staff be asked to inquire and seek another operator.
I know they're out there, but like, we don't do that.
Right. Okay, so friendly amendment accepted. Okay, are we ready for the recorded vote?
Should we read the?
You want to reread the resolution? Thank you.
That report number F 2218 entitled Follow-up Report, Emergency Management Icebreaking Services be received, and that Malahide Township as the benefiting municipality does hereby accept the quotation submitted by Lemurs Excavating to provide icebreaking services in Port Bruce from January 1st to March 31st, 2023 be accepted, and that staff inquire about the possibility about securing a second long arm excavator.
So recorded vote, please.
Deputy Mayor Widner,
Not one. I would say no, because we don't know what it's set up.
Ward 1.
Are your microphones on as you vote?
Sorry.
I'll say no, because we don't know whether we can get a second excavator.
Ward 1 Counselor Sarah Leach,
Yes, a piece of equipment is better than no piece of equipment.
Ward 2 Counselor John H. Wilson,
I think for the last flood with the millions of dollars that it cost people, spending 40,000 more on a drag line. Then with the possible ability to grab a long arm excavator. Is more feasible than. Like if you get the long arm and you need a second one, that's it. If you have the drag line in place, you can still call the long arm. It doesn't, the mob and demob required for that piece of equipment is minimal compared to where the drag line is. So, no.
Ward 3 Counselor Cerna,
No.
Ward 4 Counselor Lewis,
No.
Ward 5 Counselor Glinski,
No.
Mayor Jiguer.
No.
Motion is,
Yeah.
motion is defeated. Is it the will of council then, would someone want to propose another motion? Counselor Wilson.
I'd like to propose that we. Like Counselor Lewis had to say, if the drag line isn't, if it's down there and not needed. The operating costs aren't there. If it's down there and it's used, the 40,000 in cost difference compared to what the insurance costs of the people that live there are. It's, it's hard to. No one wants to spend any money. Basically, but. If we don't spend 40,000 more to save millions of dollars in claims. I don't think that that's really what we should be doing for our ratepayers.
So would you like to
So
move?
I guess I'd like to move that we get the drag line down there. And I think if we get the drag line down there, that doesn't mean we can't call in the long arm excavator if required. I think that's easier than trying to find two long arms by the sounds of things.
So Adam, can you comment on that?
Yes, thank you, your worship. Councillor Wilson, I don't disagree. What we've found with this round, this year's procurement of those machines is as I spoke to previously, what's different now is there's work for these contractors elsewhere. In previous years, the long arm excavator has been willing to come on an emergency basis, on an on-call basis. This year, however, if the drag line is procured, that's fine. If the long arm is as well, so council is procuring two, not one over the other, but two. That's fine. But the long arm excavator contract isn't willing to do the on-call this year. So the emergency call is not a guaranteed approach.
Councilor Lewis, did you want to speak or did you want to second or both? Add to the motion? Go ahead.
If I may, your worship, on that motion for staff, if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, being we only had one tender come in, I believe we could also give direction to staff to go back to our one tender and see if he can still sharpen his pencil. And I believe that is still allowed, being that we only had one tender. Had we had two tenders, we could never do that. Being we had one tender, I believe we can go back and say, hey, we need you to cut your pencil down and work with us a bit. And I believe they will. I can't see why they wouldn't be, and if they give them the contract. So I would put that in the motion that we secure it, but also work it as hard as we can to get the best proposed deal that we can possibly get, if that's an option.
Yes, I do believe the motion could read that we direct staff to enter into a contract negotiation with the hope that we can address the difficult financial difficulty that what their first bid is proposing. Go ahead, Adam.
Thank you, your worship. I think so if there's a draft motion, I think what's important at this point is whether council is interested in just the drag line or the drag line as well as the long arm excavator.
Councilor Wilson?
Through you, Madam Mayor. It's a little odd that the bid would come with a clause that says we can't do standby. Does that means that their excavator is not available?
So just to clarify, like, so we'll have to be careful. So similar to the second operator, to be fair, again, we can only use the data that we have in this room tonight. So we don't know whether it's this operator or another operator officially, whether it will be possible. So we have to be able to live with the possibility that we will not be able to secure a long arm on call. I think what I'm hearing from council is that fiscally, we're not going to pay for two machines to stand by. Deputy Mayor Widner.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Gazier. I think it would be foolish not to inquire about a second.
For sure.
You know, I still don't like the fact there's one machine down there. That really bothers me because you're a mechanic too, and you know stuff breaks. I don't care if it's 5 minutes old or 50 years old. It costs us nothing. And I know there's some down east, right? Is there not? Like you're kind of from Delhi and that, there's a lot of ponds and things going. There's some long reaches down there for sure. So might be worthwhile to inquire for sure.
So perhaps we can capture that intent in the resolution and saying, you know, being, whereas council's preference is access to two pieces of equipment, be it resolved that staff be directed to negotiate the contract for a drag line with the hope of achieving, you know, a responsible, fiscally responsible agreement. And that staff explore who may be available to provide on-call services for a long arm. Does that sound like your motion? Was that right? That's what you were saying.
Yes.
So. And that petitions for the drag line accepted and that staff explore on-call services for a long arm.
I wouldn't say accepted, I would say enter into negotiation. Or do we accept, yeah. We can accept the bid.
Able to. And what's the desire is to explore alternative?
Not an alternative, a second,
Availability.
to
Oh,
the
so
availability
a
of a
second.
long arm to be on call.
Okay.
So yes. So whereas the wish of council is to have ideally 2 machines. And whereas currently, according to the bids received, 2 machines on standby is cost prohibitive.
Yes.
We have we're having this discussion just as an aside, that we're having this discussion without having our full budget deliberation. And it's not gonna be an easy budget. We all know there's a difficult year coming ahead. So we're already, stretching ourselves, no pun intended, but just parking that. So whereas 2 machines are on standby or cost prohibitive, be it resolved that staff enter negotiation to secure a drag line on standby, and that a long arm on-call contract be explored. So if you're comfortable with that, Councillor Wilson, do you want to move that? Or
Yes.
so we'll just deal
Well,
with the
it-
motion,
he-
just
here,
with the mover. Sorry, did you want to move or speak?
Well, the thing is, we want to have access to 2, but we don't want to pay for 2. Right? We can't afford to pay for 2. The Catfish Creek guys say that the dredge is the way to go. But that's not where it jammed. So this is like, it's awful.
This is not an
Yeah.
easy situation because we don't have data on the past to guide us, and we cannot predict the future. This is a very difficult situation, and we have a very difficult budget year ahead. So I totally appreciate. And I also want to add that, as you probably noticed, the budget and our levy to Catfish Creek is being, discussed. And we will meet with Catfish Creek to see where they can contribute, because as I said, this is part of their responsibility. And it may be time, now that the costs have increased to what we see now, it may be time to review their contribution. So let's just deal with the motion, if I may. So I have a mover. Could I have a seconder? Louis? Final comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. So just to reiterate to council, we tendered for a drag line and a long arm, and we got 1 for each. We got a bid for a long arm. So it's very difficult for council to dismiss that bid and look elsewhere for a long arm. So it's, are we clear on that?
May I have a vote?
Well, this to me sounds like, once again, like we sort of need more information. So to come up with a resolution on the spot, I know we've already deferred it, but it's not really, we don't have everything.
And I appreciate that. And it's, for the sake of the safety of our residents, it takes time to negotiate a contract. We're going into holidays. I will insist, this is a 1-year decision. And as soon as this contract is signed, I can guarantee you, we're studying what the decision for next year. So there's going to be a longer runway, and we won't be in this situation, which is very difficult. Like I said, I appreciate that. So seconder, we have Councillor Lewis. Could we have a vote? And do you wish for this vote to be recorded? You're voting on accepting or asking staff to negotiate the drag line contract. Yes, and exploring a provider of an on-call long arm. We have a mover and seconder. Can we have a vote? And do you want the vote recorded, or are you ready to vote? Okay, so those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. So, How about an easy agenda item like the summary service and report for, I think, October and November? Go ahead, Jeff.
To your worship, is this for the, we're now on the activities service report. We're done with that? Okay. I got a few things to add to my report here. Down here on my page. So just to go over my report, this is for October and November. So we responded to 62 incidents over the course of those 2 months. 3 of those were structure fires, with this total dollar saved around $9 million. So $9 million of buildings saved. Our fire prevention team was busy for those 2 month span. We had 11 events. These included 2 fire hall open houses, several school visits, and a home show. Announcing today that we are again training our OPC police cadets. With the COVID, we have not done it in the last 2 years. So we had, we're now doing it again. We're scheduled for January the 9th. So that's done. One other piece of correspondence I wouldn't mind sharing with you is the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs has put out a little bit of a report looking at challenges of the fire services in Canada. So they've identified a few things where there's increased call volumes, lack of staffing, price of increases of operating, all those things. So they're in Ottawa this week, looking to impose a few things and get the help for the municipalities to get some more funding, and get back the JEP grant where council was able to apply to get some money for some critical infrastructure trucks and stuff like that, and be able to secure some of that money. So other than that, if I have any other questions on this report, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jeff. Questions, comments? Seeing none, resolution?
The report number F 22-17 entitled Emergency Services Activity Report, October, November be received.
Mover and seconder, Lewis, Serna.
December 15th, 2022 meeting be extended past the stated time duration of 3 hours set out in procedural bylaw 1797, section 23.1 to allow council to continue with its deliberations.
Thank you. Can I have a mover and seconder? Lewis, Glinsky, all in favor? Carried. We're still gonna work hard to move things quickly, but.
Sorry.
If you need to leave, it's okay. We have.
If the doctor's office is calling, you shouldn't better answer right.
But in the event, we have forums. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next item is from Public Works. Matt, are you, or is it Sam who's going to?
Through your worship, yeah, I'll speak to this report. So the report that's brought before council tonight is for a re-endorsement of the operational plan. So we have a drinking water quality management standard, which in Ontario, all water systems have this standard if you're providing public municipally or water to the public through a municipal system. The operational plan has 21 different elements. Element 3 is the commitment and endorsement of top management. So when there are changes to top management, for example, within Aqua, we've had recent changes to their top management and now changes with the top management of Malahide Township. So that requires re-endorsement of the operational plan by the mayor and clerk to essentially or exemplify that council has received and is aware of the operational plan and the commitment and endorsement that is required for that. So I'd be happy to answer any further questions you may have.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Really a bit of a housekeeping item, I guess. So the resolution,
That report number PW 2266 entitled Malahide Distribution System DWQMS Operational Plan Revision to Element 3 Commitment Endorsement be received, and that the Council of the Township of Malahide authorize the mayor and clerk to sign Element 3 Commitment and Endorsement.
mover and seconder. Louis Glinsky, all in favor? Carried. And the next report is that the standardized contract documents. Matt, please.
Yes, through your worship, this is a report I'm very pleased to bring before council. In my prior life as a consulting engineer, it's an added burden to undertake work on municipalities to review work on their behalf and do design work when there's no standardized contract documents or specifications. It takes up a considerable amount of staff time with every supplier, contractor, consultant we work with and their new staff when they ask questions. What would you like to see? What type of gravel do you use on this project? How would you like your water valves to turn? Those types of things. So now this was a joint effort with Elgin County, West Elgin and Southwold to prepare this complete technical guidance document. So at a high level, review of what this package is defining what standard materials the township uses for infrastructure, construction methods, payment standards for sewer and water main construction, road construction, paving, sidewalks, traffic signals, electrical work, traffic control, and pavement marking and landscaping. So staff are seeking that council formally adopt these standards so staff can rely on a standardized and consistent technical guidance that we operate, design and work within. And thankfully, with this joint effort, it's nearly countywide that we'll all have these same standards. So all the consultants we typically work with and the local contractors can become familiar with what we want to see and how we want to see our infrastructure built.
Questions, comments? Counselor Wilson.
I think it's a just fantastic idea. It's incredibly thorough. I'm not sure what you could do that's not in there as far as construction goes. But it was, very interesting going through it all. And it's just great that there's a almost countywide set of guidelines for that sort of thing. I'm surprised it didn't exist before, but I'm glad it does now. Kudos.
Yeah, so is that, oh, sorry, Counselor Blinsky.
I think it was quite thorough and maybe too thorough to be called a contract, and it should be maybe put into a manual and printed so that it's available to everybody, because here it's just going to evaporate.
And
Just my thought.
Yes, and the target audiences are like the contractors, right? And did you want to comment on that, Matt?
Yes, through you, your worship, that's correct. After this is adopted, it's our intent that staff will send this out to all the consultants that we typically see, the contractors that we work with. It'll be available on the website, and all public works staff will become very familiar with the document to make sure that we can follow up and ensure everything's going consistent. There's a number of designs and drawings that are in the files from over the years that say per Township of Malahide standards, and now we have a standard. So it's no longer new staff's opinions on things. It's all in accordance with the published document.
So how often would you review this standard? Because I would assume sometimes there's new materials, new technology. So what's the plan for renewal review?
Yes, so in the staff report, I've included a recommended review timeline of annually for minor revisions. We intend to have the group for all the partner municipalities meet annually to review these things, because new construction methods are always happening, new materials, so we want to stay current with that. And we'll have minor changes be authorized at a staff level, and then we'll do a major overhaul every 5 years to review the complete document and update everything with all the amendments.
Further questions? Deputy Mayor Widner?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Gajer. To you to Matt, I suppose this would help limit liability. And also help with warranty claims, because we have had issues in the past with gravel that wasn't up to snuff, pavement that wasn't up to snuff and things like that, so.
That's exactly it. It should help with those things that there's now known expectation. It doesn't vary from project to project. At the surface, it doesn't vary from project to project. Every project will have their certain things. You're not going to use the same gravel in different soil types, things like that, but we have something to start from. And at least the measure of payment for that gravel has now been stated. So those standardized things can then be relied on.
Great, thank you.
And would you say that's something contractors appreciate and look for? So that makes us even more competitive, that we're attractive, so we can attract more bids, more competitive bids?
I don't know whether it would attract more bids or more competitive bids. Those items are generally included in contracts that a consultant would put together on an infrastructure project. But now we don't need a consultant to come up, reinvent the wheel every time. They've already got something to rely upon.
Great, so there's savings in that. So if there are no further comments, can I have the resolution?
The report number PW 2265 entitled Standardized Contract Documents and Supplemental Specifications be received, and that the Elgin County Standard Contract Documents and Supplemental Specifications be adopted and enforced as of council's approval, and that the Elgin County Standard Contract Documents and Supplemental Specifications be reviewed by staff every year for minor revisions and every 5 years for major revisions to keep current, and that the Director of Public Works be authorized to authorize minor changes to the Elgin County Standard Contract Documents and supplemental specifications as required, noting major changes will require the approval of council.
Mover and seconder. Leach, Widner, all in favor? Carried. Sam, I think it's back to you. The water
Yes.
distribution system final inspection report.
Thank you through you, your worship. So on July 27th of 2022, the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks conducted the required annual inspection of the Malahide water distribution system. The primary focus of the inspection is to confirm compliance with applicable legislation, as well as evaluating conformance with ministry drinking water policies, guidelines during that inspection period. So a physical inspection was conducted on that day along with document records review and on various parameters or various documentation that we record was reviewed as part of this inspection. And so the MECP has a fairly rigorous scoring system for these water systems based on a risk rating methodology. And so the primary goal of the scoring system is to encourage municipalities across Ontario to improve their systems and to establish a way to measure their improvements based on previous inspection scorings. So it is important to note that even if a system didn't receive 100% rating, it doesn't necessarily mean that the system was considered unsafe. It's more that there's opportunities for improvement that were identified. So for this particular inspection period, the Malahide distribution system received a mark of 100%, and there were no non-compliances with regulatory requirements identified during the inspection period. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Widner.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Show you're doing a great job. I don't ever remember us having a poor scoring or anything like that. So keep up the great work. It's great to see this.
Thank you.
Yeah, nothing like 100% on a report card.
Better than my school marks.
Resolution, please.
That report number PW 22-61 entitled Malahide Water Distribution System 2022 MECP Final Inspection Report be received.
Mover and seconder, Cerna, Wilson, all in favor? Carried. And then Sam, you have another report for us for the provision of infrastructure report this time.
Thank you through you, your worship. So this report is brought for council's information. As part of the 21 elements I mentioned from the DWQMS, we are required, or basically there's elements 14 and 15 of the operational plan requires that we do an infrastructure review and provide capital recommendations. So annually, Aqua, the operating authority, meets with staff and provides these recommendations, which, and as you'll note, there are with the attached sheet that was provided with the report, there is a 6-year projection from Aqua for expenditures, but this is not a cost that is observed by council. This report is to bring forward kind of this year's current recommendations. Each year you will see these recommendations can change depending on priorities that emerge or different issues that can occur, but it's really to keep council informed on an annual basis of the things that we're looking at and reviewing with Aqua and what's recommended. So this is used to formulate the budget and is really, this report's brought forth to satisfy those elements of the QMS. But the purpose of the report is really for that reason, and the budget, this was used in support of the budget development. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, the resolution, please.
That report number PW 22-67 entitled Malahide Water Distribution System 2022 Review and Provision of Infrastructure Report be received.
Mover and seconder. Lewis, Glinsky, all in favor? Carried. Okay, the next reports, we move to next section, finance and treasurer. And this is when we get to look at the study and the presentation that we received a few hours ago. So Tanya, can you walk us through what we need to look at?
Mayor Giguere, Deputy Mayor Whitner, councillors. I present to you report FIN 22-28, the water and wastewater rate study, the Malahide tertiary water and the wastewater system. As you saw earlier in the night, the Township of Malahide retained Watson Associates Economics Limited to undertake the water and wastewater rate study. Staff have used the recommendations provided in the Watson Water and Sewer Rate Study to inform its 2023 water and sewer budgets. It is recommended that the Watson study be approved by council and referenced when the following reports FIN 2226 and FIN 2227 are considered.
Comments or question on this first part? Seeing none, the resolution.
The report number FIN 22-28 entitled Water and Wastewater Rate Study, Malahide Tertiary Water and Wastewater System be received, and that the study of Watson Associates Economics Limited entitled Water and Wastewater Rate Study, Malahide Tertiary Water and Wastewater System dated November 22nd, 2022, as well as the accompanying presentation be accepted.
Mover and seconder, Leach, Whitner, all in favor? Carried. Okay, moving on to the next item, Tanya.
I present report FIN 22-26, the draft 2023 water budget. As stated, staff have used the recommendations provided in the Watson Associates Water and Sewer Study presented tonight to inform its 2023 budget. The purpose of this report is for council to only approve the 2023 budget and rates. Future budgets have been provided for information purposes only. As explained earlier by Watson and Associates, there's a 5% increase to rates proposed for 2023. The flat rate quarterly charge would increase to $82.32 from the $78.40, an increase of $3.92 quarterly. And then the consumption charge per cubic meter would increase to $4.92 from the $4.69, an increase of 23 cents per cubic meter. The overall impact of the increases to a house using an average of 200 cubic meters yearly would be an increase of $5.08 a month based on the proposed rates. Included in the report, there was a comparison of the neighboring municipality rates. Central Elgin, their per cubic meter rate of $3.26. The BAM's Richmond system rate per cubic meter, $4.02. And Elmer has a per consumption rate of $2.37 to provide a few comparisons. Our rates are high, but the higher density regions are able to set lower rates as they are able to provide water distribution infrastructure more efficiently on a per household basis. As stated by Watson, we have 649 customers and a very large water system. So a few changes to point out in the 2023 budget spreadsheets. Administrative costs increased by 6,398, the majority being an increase to the wages and benefits, as well as there was an increase to the Execulink contract in those costs as well. Booster station costs have increased by 500 to reflect an increased cost in utilities. And under the system operation costs increased by 23,704. There's several factors in this. Additional costs for the renegotiated Aqua contract is included in that, as well as the service and repairs have increased. There's several meter repairs as well as a sample station hydro repair planned in those costs. A new additional cost to the 2023 budget is the SCADA support and service agreement as noted in the report. One thing to point out with the reserves is due to the Talbot Street East water main replacement project that was awarded, there's going to be an amount drawn from the reserves, taking the balance down to 257,261. Therefore, increases to the reserves are projected to replace funds for future projects. In conclusion, overall expenses for 2023 have increased by 30,602. The proposed rates by Watson and Associates for 2023 generate additional revenue in the amount of 33,785. The additional $3,183 will be an increase to the amount transferred to reserves for 2023. I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thank you. Well done. Questions? Councilor Lewis.
Through your worship, I wish I'd asked earlier to Watson's. They used the terminology assumed consumption would be increased. And that was part of the base on the percentage of the increase of cost. I don't know if I like to hear assumed consumption increase. Because that's assuming. So how do you assume the increase? Is it new connections? Is it, I really regret asking earlier. I apologize for that because I don't expect an answer from you, Tanya.
No,
Maybe
that's
Sam
okay.
though.
Yeah, and I had a similar question because the per household consumption, sometimes you try to encourage conservation. Councillor Wilson, you want to comment?
Yeah, it's sort of in my wheelhouse. Basically, when I know this is really driving the point home, but when you used to have to go to the well and do this to get your water out, you didn't use as much water. So people today don't have to do that. So they just keep using more and more and more. And people that are from a rural background know that you just don't leave the tap on because you, depending on your system, you might drain your well. People today that are especially connected to that pipeline, they don't, conservation isn't something that they're too worried about, and they want more and they want it now. That's just what our customers are like. That's, it's just, they want all that water right then. And they're not going backwards with how much they're using.
So where do we see incentives around conservation kicking in, where if we know that increased consumption then also leads to increased costs and rates? So is there room in the program to incentivize conservation and rebates, and maybe not something for tonight, but I was curious about that we're assuming everybody's just going to consume more. And I don't know, more appliances, more water consumption, but Councillor Leach and then Councillor Glinski.
Your worship, I do notice that in the report, there is the consumption charge per cubic meter, so that they do have some control over their fees. So if they chose not to have such a large bill, there is some mitigation on their part that they could take advantage of.
Glinski.
All I, Madam Mayor, all I was going to say is that a lot of the systems are on meters. So if you're metered individually, if you leave the tap running, that's going to hit your own wallet. So if they're metered, it's going to be controlled. If they're not metered, you're right, John, they're just going to let it flow.
Sam or Tanya, did you want to add to it? You don't have to move the microphone's actually pretty good at.
Yes.
picking
The only
up.
thing I would add in my experience, just in municipal, like prior to like in the nineties and eighties, people were on flat rates and weren't metered, but on a municipal supply. So one of the intents of metering was to promote that water conservation. And it does put that individual responsibility kind on that individual owner for what they consume. One of the reasons that we've had to build in a service connection fee, and every water system does, is because we need to operate and maintain these systems. So we have to guarantee there can't be a variable in how much we bring in each year. So and one of the things that has been observed in recent years is more conservation, which is the reason why you're seeing service connection fees, like the base charge, come up, because you have to be able to guarantee some incoming revenue if there's a dip in what you're bringing or selling, essentially. But I do believe meters have kind of created more conservation, but it's definitely true that prior to metering the homes, it was people could use as much as they want, and that really affected the municipalities' operating budgets. But that's probably a 20-year-old, like we've come a long ways from that, I believe. So anyways, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you for all the additional insights. And so the assumptions are there just for budgeting purposes, because you have to, again, an educated guess, but great. If there are no further comments, may I have the resolution?
The report number FIN 22-26 entitled Draft 2023 Water Budget be received, and that the council for the Township of Malahide adopt bylaw number 22-95 having the effect of approving the 2023 water budget and the user rates for 2023 as presented, and that the municipal staff be authorized to carry out the administrative acts necessary to implement such budget and user rates as approved.
Mover and seconder, Lewis. Wilson, all in favor? Carried. Tanya, go ahead with the next item.
Okay, the next report to present is report FIN 22-27, the draft 2023 sewer budget. Again, staff have used the recommendations provided in the Watson Associates Water and Wastewater Study presented tonight to inform its 2023 sewer budget. Watson explained earlier that there's a 3.4% increase to the rates proposed for 2023. It's a flat rate quarterly charge, and it would increase to $293 from $283.02, which is approximately a yearly increase of $40 per household. A few changes to the budget for 2023 as highlighted. Wages and benefits have increased by $1,005. The pumping station costs have increased by $550, mostly increased costs of utilities. System operations have increased by $11,380, includes increases to the lagoon operations, the aqua contract, as well as the new costs for the 2023 SCADA support and service agreement as well. Additional revenue generated by the increased rates is $6,230. And the amount contributed to reserves will be reduced by $9,204 for 2023 due to the increased expenses next year proposed. Any questions?
Questions or comments? Seeing none, may I have the resolution?
The report number FIN 22-27 entitled Draft 2023 Sewer Budget be received, and that the council for the Township of Malahide adopt bylaw number 22-96 having the effect of approving the 2023 sewer budget and the user rates for 2023 as presented, and that the municipal staff be authorized to carry out the administrative acts necessary to implement such budget and user rates as approved.
Mover and seconder. Lewis, Cerna, all in favor? Carried. And Tanya, I think you're still up.
Yes. Report FIN 22-25, the temporary borrowing bylaw. Each year, the Township of Malahide adopts a temporary borrowing bylaw. This allows the head of council or the treasurer to borrow from time to time such sums as the council considers necessary to meet the expenses of the municipality until taxes are collected and revenue received. The lender shall be the Royal Bank of Canada, and at this time, staff do not anticipate temporary borrowing in 2023, but it is a measure in case the need arises.
Questions or comments? Resolution?
The report number FIN 22-25 entitled Temporary Borrowing Bylaw be received, and that bylaw 22-91 be given a first, second, and third reading.
Mover and seconder, Glinsky, Cerna, all in favor? Carried. I think you have one more.
FIN 22-24, the 2022. FIN 22-2024, the 2023 interim tax levy bylaw. Again, annually, the township adopts the interim tax levy bylaw. Section 317 of the Municipal Act 2001 permits the levy of up to 50% of the prior year's taxes before a final budget and final tax rates have been set for the year. The interim levy bylaw is required to provide for the revenue requirements of the township prior to the final tax bylaw. The interim levy will be due in 2 installments dated the 15th of March, 2023 and the 15th of June, 2023.
Questions or comments? Resolution?
The report number FIN 22-24 entitled 2023 interim tax levy bylaw be received, and that bylaw 22-90 be given a first, second, and third reading.
Mover and seconder, Cerna, Lewis, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, Tanya. Lots of work. Merry Christmas. Now we have the report from Long Point Conservation Authority. Is that right? Just for a minute. Sorry.
So that the following
Go ahead.
reports of committee and outside boards be noted and filed. Long Point Region Conservation Authority Board of Directors minutes of November 2nd, 2022 and November 9th, 2022.
Questions, comments? Mover and seconder? Cerna? Leach, all in favor? Carried. I know it's getting late. Correspondence. Any comments? Seeing none, the resolution?
That the following correspondence items 1 through 7 be noted and filed.
Mover and seconder? Widner? Lewis, all in favor? Carried. Are now ready to move in closed session, or are there any other business? Deputy Mayor Widner.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Gazera. I hate to take up time, but we had our first county council meeting, and I think we should be trying to bring highlights to it. If we can.
Absolutely.
We did discuss the doctor shortage, and I think they were quite surprised that Elmer is not in that great a shape. We also discussed the ambulance program, all the committees and what they do. I'm surprised there's so many committees, and I think they're going to try to whittle some of them down. And the insurance updates for the county, their insurance is really going up because of cyber attacks. But we did go to an emergency meeting today, and they explained the cyber attacks and what can cause them, and it was a real eye opener. Like the cable that plugs into your computer, you can buy a brand new one. It can have a virus in it. Those the chips that everybody call those ports you put in, plug in. USB, you can buy brand new and it can plug in your phone. They said someone took Remembrance Day photos, downloaded it on the township site, and it infected everything. So you really have to be cognizant, but it really makes you afraid, right? So other than that, I think we'll try to bring something through if we find anything exciting, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would suggest if council is willing that we make that a standard report, a standard, instead of other business, like reports from boards. I think it's good to just bring highlights and then ensure if there are any questions, but then we can provide information right away. So thank you for doing that, Deputy Mayor Widner. Any other business? Seeing none. Go ahead.
That council move into closed session at 10:17 PM pursuant to section 239-2 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended to discuss the following. 1, labor relations or employee negotiations and or personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees relating to municipal office staffing. 2, labor relations or employee negotiation matter relating to unionized staff positions. 3, labor relations or employee negotiation matters relating to a shared staff recruitment matter relating to the Development Services Department.
Mover and seconder. Lewis, Glinsky, all in favor? Carried. Big meeting short.
Yeah, so the labor relations or employee negotiations and personnel matters relating to municipal office staffing. So the resolution is that municipal staff be directed to proceed with the realignment of staff responsibilities and that the organization chart be updated to reflect these changes.
Mover and seconder. Lewis, Wilson, all in favor? Carried. Next resolution.
So that during the closed session, council provided direction to municipal staff regarding labor relations or an employee negotiation matter in relation to unionized staff positions. There's nothing further to report. And labor relations or employee negotiations relating to the Development Services Department, that during the closed session, council provided direction relating to a shared staff recruitment matter relating to the Development Services Department, and there's nothing further to report. And
so confirmatory bylaw then?
That bylaw number 22-92 being a confirmatory bylaw be given first, second, and third readings and properly signed and sealed.
Mover and seconder, Serna, Leach, all in favor? Opposed?
And that
Carried.
And that council adjourn its meeting at 10:51 PM to meet again on January 5th, 2023 at 7:30 PM.
Mover and seconder, Widner, Glinsky, all in favor? Carried. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to everyone.